Good evening, Littleton. Welcome to the January 17th Joint Select Board and Finance Committee meeting. Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I call the Select Board meeting to order.
And I call the Finance Committee meeting to order.
Woohoo! I guess we'll jump right in with the town clerk. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Actually, can we go back?
Yeah.
Why don't we have Alicia just kick it off? I think she was
Okay.
prepared to
Oh, I'm
start it,
sorry.
and then
I didn't
we'll
know.
get into it. That's okay.
No one told me what the agenda was.
Alicia, go ahead, then I'll jump in and add
Okay.
everything that you may.
Welcome, Honorable Select Board and Finance Committee members, to the joint budget meeting tonight. I'm going to hand it over to Town Administrator Ansaldi to go over what we're going to be presenting, and I will also be presenting a lot of these tonight and also jumping in if any of the department heads need me.
Thank you. So, you have the schedule for tonight's meeting with a number of departments, and like Alicia said, she'll be doing a big bulk of that being the finance department. You know, our recommendation to the Select Board and the Finance Committee is, as you're going through this process, these next 3 meetings, quite possibly be 4 meetings, we have to make an adjustment for the schools on February 4th, which we'll work on, but you'll hear some additional requests. We certainly told department heads to advocate for yourself as far as what you wanted and what we were able to recommend funding for the FY24 budget. With that, you know, it probably would be a good idea to have a list of items where if you're interested in adding it or seeing something, and then if there was a potential funds that became available, you know, keep in mind that when we built our the budget, we still had a lot of unknowns. We had health insurance, which we projected as a 9%. Could that come in lower? Hopefully it does, and that could be a little chunk of money there that we have available. We also, you're waiting on, we haven't had the cherry sheets, which is those local aid numbers from Division of Local Services, which is the Governor's House 1 with their recommended. So that's an unknown too. So there may be an opportunity once numbers come available that maybe perhaps at your last meeting you go through that pecking order and maybe prioritizing what you'd like to see. So I think that's just our recommendation. Hopefully that's helpful to the boards. Other than that, we're ready to roll.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, we're going to be meeting again next Tuesday. It'll be library, IT, going through 850, and we still have our warrant articles on our agenda. And then, of course, Saturday, February 4th is our super Saturday. Anthony maybe mentioned something about the schools that we may have to adjust, but right now that's police, fire, DPW, our big 3, cemetery, and schools that we'll be bringing up there. Schools do have a scheduling conflict for February 4th, so maybe squeeze in another meeting just for them at night, maybe before the 4th, so you can have that big budget discussion after, which both boards are used to having. So maybe if the Thursday might work for folks, I don't know, it's up to 26th. Another meeting, unfortunately. Or somehow we gotta squeeze the schools in, and I don't think that we'd have, putting them next meeting would create a very long night.
Do they not have even a quorum of the school committee?
We just received notice that it's a conflict. I haven't talked to Kelly to see if he'd like to proceed without the school committee chair, but that hasn't happened in the past, so I
Okay.
would think that he wouldn't want to do that.
I think
And that he'd wait.
I think he's on the budget committee as well, the chair.
The chair, yeah, so it's, you know, another night.
Okay. Well, if we have to, I mean, I agree it would be important to meet with the school committee.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, just
So let's try to find a night that works for as many of us as.
All right, I'll work with them to find a night, and then I'll propose something in an email to the 2 chairs. And
Thanks.
thanks.
We ready to go?
we are, can I make one note, Diane,
Sure,
before we start?
absolutely.
Okay. When you are looking at the town clerk budget, you're gonna notice the 16,188 down, and that's just because we had reclassed her unfunded details mandate that we funded at special town meeting. We put it in that line, we ended up putting it down to elections where it belongs. So I just wanted to make that note before she started.
And we're on page 87, town clerk's budget's on page 87. That's where it starts.
You sure?
No, I'm sorry, 91, I'm sorry.
That's it.
That's Michelle's budget's 87.
I have it on page 94, clerk and elections.
That's what we announced, right?
No, that's-
Thank you for having me. So basically, when we were talking about doing the budget, Ryan stated to all of us and Anthony during our department head meetings, they said, you know, each and every one of us should possibly be doing a PowerPoint. So in the PowerPoint, what we have set out is, what are some of your major accomplishments? And of course, you know, when you look at the town clerks, what do we do all the time? Every year we do, obviously, our elections. But also, in our office, we do public records requests. And I think part of what we do is making sure that the public records requests get done in a timely fashion. And people don't understand that we get those almost every day. But the public records requests don't always have to do with the clerk's office. And so we're making sure that it gets disseminated to all the different departments. This year, we had approximately 30 of them that were directly impacted on the town. And then there were many of them that we were able to deal with that had to do with other departments, but we were able to deal with them in our in-house with our office. And a lot of them were with the building department, which we were able to say, go on to the building department's website and you can find out that information. So even though it didn't have to do with the clerk's office, we were able to deal with it. The other thing that we want you to know that we want to maintain the integrity of the elections, both local and otherwise. So people don't understand how much we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis with the elections, both locally. We had several last year. We had primary, we had the general, and we had our own local elections. So last year was a fun-filled year, dealing with early voting, vote by mail, for both the primary and the general election. So last year was a long year, and this year we get a little bit of a reprieve, but then we go right back next year. So as far as the budget update, department goals, we want to be able to do more training for both myself and the assistant town clerk, and to continue to strive to keep the clerk's office efficient, effective for all residents and voters. And what are the capital budget requests right now? We're not looking for anything, so.
Please hold your applause to
What are we looking for any revised capital budget requests? We're not looking for anything right now. Projected 25 to 29 5-year capital plans. We're looking right now for possibly replacing our voting machines. So the voting machines that we have right now have been there since before I came into office. So they've done this town pretty well. And so looking 5 years down the road, 4 years down the road, what are they going to cost to be replaced? $5,700 per machine. We have 3 polling off places, and so $5,700 and $200 per year. So you're looking at about $17,000, which really, if they last as long as the ones that we have now, you're looking at a good benefit for the town. So, you know, if we can maintain what we have now, they'll definitely last another 5 years, because we really do take care of our machines. We have them maintained every year, twice a year, and it's only $200 to maintain them. And the only problem is, as LHS from New Hampshire the LHS Associates in New Hampshire says, if something happens, they're not going to have the parts to replace them because they are so old. But, you know, we just keep our fingers crossed and keep them, you know, well-maintained. The other possibility that we are looking into is what's called polling pads. A lot of the towns around us have the polling pads, and what that is when somebody checks in, instead of the good old-fashioned paper check-ins, it's like an iPad, and you find your name, you check it off, and that's it, you're done. So you're not standing there and people are going down papers trying to find you. It's a quick and easy check-in process, and it would be for both the town meeting as well as the election. So we're looking at around the same time frame, maybe a little bit sooner for those. And then what happens is when we come back to town hall, we just take a little tab and push it right into the machine, and it runs all the reports for us. So those are about 10,000, and they're a little bit more expensive to maintain, about $300. So they're a little bit more expensive, you wouldn't think, but they're a little bit more expensive to keep upkeep.
Diane, can I ask you a question through the chair?
Sure.
Just, so a couple of questions on the new polling stations. You said 3. What if one, I'm just curious, if one goes down during an election, do we just start running people through another machine, or do you need a 4th for backup?
So for the actual new machines that we're
Yes.
looking at, we should have a 4th, but the new machines are so well done that nobody's ever had to use a backup until they're like 3 or 4 years down the road. So if we did need to get one, they're saying maybe in your 4th year you might be looking to get a 4th one.
The other question was on the pads.
Yep.
What's the integrity of the system? So I come to the iPad, I check in as Matthew.
Yep.
I go and vote as Matthew, and then I come back in around as me. I punch in as me.
Yeah, so
What's
you
the
wouldn't be
integrity of
you
this?
wouldn't be doing it. It would be the people.
It is some on the other end. Okay,
Yeah,
that was the
yeah.
question. It sounds like
Yeah,
I didn't realize.
Yeah, no, it's the same people. You'd still be doing the same type of check-in. It just wouldn't be paper.
Got it.
It's just would be.
Great. That's actually
Yeah.
much more efficient, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had one other question.
Sure.
On the maintenance, you said you're currently paying the $200 per machine for maintenance?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's not a new expense? It's
No, it's not a new expense.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So with the pad, is there still a paper record of the actual voting?
Yeah. So that would go. So the new machines. So it's two tiers. So your polling pad is just for the people that are checking in.
Okay, yep.
And then what normally we would do would go back and we have this clicker and we check each person as, you know, so we have a barcode.
Right.
You check each person and it goes into the machine at the office. And that's how we check all the people after the voting. So it takes us about 3-4 hours to do our voting afterwards. This would be a small little like a thumb drive. You take that thumb drive, put it into the machine, it'd be done in like 10 minutes, and we're done with it. Tallies all the people that have come through the polling location.
But there's still the paper ballot itself.
No, the paper ballot, yes, but this
Right.
is just the
So, yeah,
person.
point of clarification, just because I've been through this in a few communities.
Yeah, there's two different-
So it's checking voters in, they vote, separate process, and checking voters out to
Yeah.
make sure there's an in
Yeah.
and out process.
Yeah.
That's all that is, so the
Yes.
ballots are separate.
Being a technologist and knowing what can be hacked and what can't,
Yeah.
I want paper ballots.
Yeah, no. So the polling pad is just for checking the person in and out.
Got
And
it,
then the
got it.
machine, the other machines is for the actual balloting.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
I might have been talking a little bit fast.
Worth,
Yeah,
worth being clear.
yeah,
Diane, if I could just interrupt.
sure.
The LHS, they're the manufacturers of the AccuVote,
Yes,
which is the system that we have, which we've had
Yes.
very good luck with.
yes.
They
And they're the same ones that we would be purchasing the new machines
just
from
newer
as
newer
well.
models.
Yes,
Okay. And then anytime you hear anything on the news about systems being down, it's usually the punch cards, and
Yeah.
it's very rarely like the AccuVote system, which is, Mr. Wilson used the word integrity.
Yes.
They have one of the highest integrity of any voting
yes,
system out there.
absolutely, yep. And they actually, after the voting in November, they spoke with me and asked me what I was thinking about as far as new machines were concerned, and I said, I'm looking down the road, and they said, well, it's probably a good idea not to get them now because they're looking into a new machine,
Generation,
a new generation of machines, yes.
Okay, great.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else?
So, and Alicia had actually talked about the switch of the $16,000 on the operating budget. And then the wages, we are just going up a step, like, and expenses is $46,000. The wages are $168,000 for a total of $215,000 as far as wages and expenses. And then that's pretty much it. No real huge changes as far as our budget is concerned.
Anything to add, Alicia?
No, just want to thank Diane for all her hard work that she does.
Thank you for helping.
I have one question. On your
Sure.
your postage budget went up 700%.
Yes, well, most of that is due to elections.
So why isn't that under the election?
Well,
postage budget?
part of it is we have to do so much of sending out letters to residents for early voting, for absentee voting, so it's a 6 of one, half dozen of another. When somebody changes voting status and things like that, so sometimes it goes, this year we had some of it because we didn't have enough, so we were putting it under town clerk budget, so.
Okay, I just didn't know if it should be under the election budget instead, if it's actually an election-related expense. I wasn't questioning the
Yep.
amount, just the location.
Yeah, we can switch it if you think it
No, we can
needs to.
adjust.
Anyone else? Great.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
Dan.
thank you.
Okay. Next up is Michelle, page 87. In the book.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Good
Thanks.
evening,
Welcome.
Michelle
Good evening.
Vibert, Human Resources Director. Thank you for having me tonight. So I'll just walk through, I'm sure you've had time to read some of these, but we've been able to fully audit and reconcile our full suite of benefits to date with the help of Steve and Ann coming back to help us, which has been great. We were able to do that for employees and retirees. Something we're trying to go back to, they used the employee self-service through Munis for open enrollment before, and we would like to get back to using that. It is a more efficient and effective way of running open enrollment. So we're looking at doing that for this current year. We have been able to complete ACA reporting in-house, which was quite hefty cost to the town. Before, in prior years, it did cost a few $1,000s to get an outside company to run the ACA reporting, which is done once a year. So we've been able to put that through Munis, set up Munis to be able to do that. We do have to make a couple of tweaks in the system this year due to our plan year shift from June 1st to July 1st, but all in all, it's done in-house at this time.
So could you define ACA?
Sure. So it's the Affordable Care Act.
All right,
So
thank
we're required to report that we offered affordable
Yeah.
coverage to all our employees that are eligible for that.
Thank you.
So the other item that was a major accomplishment of this year was the compensation and classification study with the team effort of a lot of individuals, just getting the new grid together from 1 to 24 grades, taking it from 1 to 15 to 1 to 24, and then implementing that study. It originally started with GovHR. It was started in 2019. We recently have fully implemented that study effective 1/1/2023. There are a few outstanding items for that study. There are a few departments who may feel that the placement of certain positions in their department warrant a further grade change and a further review. So we are looking at those, but there's only a couple that are left. We have successfully collaborated with the school department. The school department was gracious enough to help assist us get our 19-hour HR generalist / benefits administrator, which I'll explain, back up to 40 hours because we were left with 19 hours when the shift for the former, because it happened today, the former HR generalist / benefits coordinator that was in my office was transferred down to the treasurer's office. So we were able to successfully transfer her down today. She has started in her new role. And we hired a new HR generalist / benefits administrator, which is the title change now. We also have improved the system for pre-employment. We have successfully taken, so when there was no HR staff here, the school department did take on a lot of functions that we were doing, and they were taking half of the onboarding process. We'll call it the first half of the packet you may get for onboarding. They took that on just to try to keep things flowing, and thankfully they were able to do that. But, you know, a lot of that stuff needs to come back. You know, they can't hold that forever. So they shifted that back to us. We've improved a lot of our forms that are going out for onboarding, emails that are being sent out, explanation for onboarding and education. Going forward for 24, a big piece of the job is going to be education. That starts with onboarding, especially for the benefits. HMO plan versus PPO plan is a perfect example. That can be quite a cost to the town. And we want to educate people, you know, why don't you need that? You don't need the PPO plan, versus the HMO plan, and explain why they don't need it. So there's a lot of education that, like I said, goes into the onboarding that we need to make sure we're doing for employees to not only help the employee, but also help the cost side on the town, especially for those health insurance plans. We, with a team, again, internal team, we have successfully, like I said, transferred the former HR generalist downstairs to the treasurer's office, and in doing so, we had to look at every single function and duty that ran through both offices. May have overlap, maybe they don't have overlap. What is actually going through both offices that we need to say who should be doing what? Where does it make sense to live? What's the process behind that? What's the workflow? So we've, to date, gone through all of the duties and functions that we feel will make us successful going forward and have split the two positions. We will continue to test those throughout the year. We plan on meeting every so often to evaluate that list of duties, seeing if they're accurate, seeing if we need to make adjustments anywhere. And successfully over the last year, we were able to implement new benefits, specifically AFLAC. We were able to transition our unions to, instead of town-paid short-term disability, they now are able to get voluntary short-term disability through AFLAC. We also offer hospital insurance, critical illness, and I just had a mind blank, sorry about that. Hospital, critical illness, and short-term disability, excuse me. So those were the three that we did. We do need to continue to look at long-term disability insurance. We do, per the contracts in the union, need to provide voluntary long-term disability. We are working with our provider to get 3 quotes and figure out which would be the most beneficial for our employees. You do need a certain enrollment for that to be able for them to insure you, so we have to continue with that process. So some of the goals I just touched on, the long-term disability, we will, like I said, continue to make efficient processes. We've been lucky enough to have Steve and Ann assist us with the processes that they did use back in 2020 and years before. That did work well. So we're looking to shift back to those. And, you know, with that comes training for staff. We have a lot of new staff here, especially a lot of the department heads. And they need to be trained on those administrative processes. A lot of the payroll coordinators, you know, when you get new employees, skill sets change. So we're working with everybody to say, okay, here's our best practices and policies and procedures. Now we need to train everybody on those. So we'll be looking to do that for everything that runs through the office. We want to continue to explore creative options for recruitment and retention. I will talk about a couple of those on the following slides, but we need to. We're in a market right now where it's very different from 10, even 5 years ago. It's very different, especially with COVID. Remote work is huge. I'm sure you've all had experience with that. Remote work, staying home, salaries. We've done what we've could on the salaries. That's where we're at. So what else can we do to keep people here? And we want to value our employees. That's a big thing for, you look at all the articles that come out that say, why are folks leaving their jobs? And that's a big thing, is I don't feel valued. And they call it quiet quitting. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a thing. So quiet quitting, folks will not physically quit their job, but they will do bare minimum. So we want to keep up with these things, make the best and get the best out of every employee that we can. We are working, I actually just spoke with Nancy today. She's been great. Since we have Laserfiche, we have an entire vault of payroll records that are paper payroll records. The books can be this thick, very heavy, very old. They're all structured differently. We would like to get those into Laserfiche, so I'm working with Nancy to put that as a project, a special project going forward, so they can be easily searchable for us. When we get a request for older payroll records, if someone wants to buy back time for retirement, it can take hours to go down to the vault, find the books, go through the books, copy the pages. So I'm trying to make that more efficient with the resources that we do have. We, like I mentioned before, will continue to evaluate the separation of duties between the new position that's in the treasurer's office and our current HR generalist. We're going to continue to work on the workflows and processes and make sure they're streamlined and make sure they're efficient. If we're efficient to everyone else. We want to provide that customer service to everyone. And one of the biggest things that, I've been working with Anthony on, one of my goals specifically as the director last year was to use our website more. Our website, we can use for a variety of things that we could put up there that can cut down on some of the questions we're receiving in the office, hopefully. If we're getting that onboarding information out, if we're getting the rate sheet up, just certain things that you can say, do you have a copy of the rate sheet? That takes time to stop, email them back, and send it to them. So we're effectively trying to use our website to get more of that HR-related information out. So I will be different. I told Alicia I would call this out. I will be different from every other department. I reversed this slide with the next slide. It didn't make sense to request what I was asking for without stating what was done in the budget. So you'll see in front of you the town administrator's revised operating budget adjustments. With the finance department, they decided to cut the existing 19-hour part-time HR administrative assistant, which was valued at $21,990. They are looking to, my recommendation was to change the existing, we have an existing expense line item which was put in last year for $1,500 for employee engagement. That's really for events. If we have maybe employee recognition on the events side, so if we did a new employee orientation, we had everyone gather together to meet all our new employees, just a small, coffee or something like that. That's what that $1,500 was geared towards. And the TA's recommendation was to implement we'll call it a new employee recognition line. This is for recognizing really anyone that's gone above and beyond throughout the year. We will have to develop policies and procedures to say how that's going to be done, but we're looking to reallocate funds from the Personnel Reserve Fund of $20,000 to fund the employee recognition line. We're also looking to reallocate the $20,000 from the Personnel Reserve Fund again for a tuition reimbursement. We have a lot of employees who maybe don't have their degree, that maybe want to get it, but they just can't afford to get it. Again, these are two ways we're working to be creative for recruitment and retention. What do we do for our employees here? That's what's going to make us stand out from other communities. And then the reduced expense line item for the Personnel Reserve Fund, it is currently $100,000. So with the shift of the 40,000 for the two line items that were just explained, you would be left with a $60,000 line item. As you can see at the bottom, wages between the director and the hourly HR generalist would be $185,462, and expenses would run at $171,600 for a total of $357,062.
Can I ask a question? So just the personnel reserve fund, what, I understand moving the 40,000 to the other two, but what is that used for otherwise?
I'll take it.
Okay.
So that's been used for buyouts in the past and any issues that we have with collective bargaining that might come up in the course of a year. So when you have retirees, we don't budget for that. And employees are allowed to carry over a maximum of 200 hours. So a vacation buyout can be quite costly.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what that's currently used for.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so if somebody was to retire at, say, right after the new fiscal year began and they got their full 5 weeks, say they have 5 weeks, but they carried over 5 weeks, that department now has not budgeted for the.
Great,
for-
thank you.
So this brings you to the request that, I had put in originally in the original request, but I did want to bring attention to it. I did reduce the expense line items for pre-employment, medical, advertising, and professional services by $18,388. We were able to find different companies to use that were cheaper. For example, for pre-employment testing, drug testing, alcohol testing, physicals, we were able to find a cheaper company. We're evaluating, can we continue with that? Advertising, we are exploring, since we're in a different market in this time, we're exploring different ways of advertising. Unfortunately, the days of putting a job posting on our website and MMA are not cutting it. So we need to explore better options. We're now using Indeed a lot. We are getting a lot of candidates. We now have to those qualified candidates, so they have the skill sets we need. You can pay to further, streamline and cut down on applicants if they have those skill sets. So that's what we're looking at. We're also looking at LinkedIn was just brought up recently. Can we use LinkedIn? There's a paid portion of LinkedIn. Do we need to? So those are all things I'm working over this year of evaluating. And then the big request is to fund, this is $25,000 would be for a 19-hour to put back in the 19-hour part-time HR administrative assistant that the TA had recommended cutting. I'm recommending reallocating $25,000 from that personnel reserve fund that does exist currently, which would leave $35,000 in it, and put $25,000 towards that. Now, just to throw it out there to give you an idea, if you cut that down to 15 hours, that's only going to be $20,000 needed. So that I'm trying to evaluate ways of looking at, any amount of work. I think we had talked about this last year with Fincom and the Select Board. I started the ask for a 40-hour per week assistant on top of the HR generalist. We realized that was not a realistic request at the time because there were multiple requests going on. We were willing to get it down to 19. So is there a compromise we could come to get what we need out of that HR assistant to be able to break the foot traffic, answer phone calls that come in, basically get all the individual requests that are coming in to free myself up and the HR generalist to focus on the other issues that come through the office.
Excuse me, question please on that?
Yeah.
In '22, we spent '22 we spent about 40,000. Do we know how much we've spent so far this year? What's the run rate on that? If we're talking about maybe cutting into that 60 grand, how comfortable are we taking 25 out of 60 and then have to spend 50?
So to date, we have not spent anything out of the personnel reserve fund, but you could get those union requests or vacation carryovers that.
So we haven't had to dip into this year, but we don't know you know, what, obviously you don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the year.
The prior year, it was dipped into for other expenses that were
Okay.
not personnel related for wages itself.
Okay, thank you.
Because it says fiscal year 21, $0 were actual, but that's not the case. It was actually drawn down, but just not for personnel reasons.
In 21,
In 21, yeah.
I actually am not familiar with 21, as
Okay.
my position didn't exist in 21,
Okay. 22 is
in
what
fiscal
you meant.
21.
Yeah, okay.
So my position didn't exist until fiscal year 22.
Okay.
So
We added
unfortunately,
it
I don't
back
have
in
that information.
2022.
Oh, you added it in
That was the
22?
first year,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Question. So the 40,000 was a transfer out of the reserve fund, or was that actual expenses?
Do you mean for the tuition and the,
For fiscal year 22
Expenses.
actual, those were personnel reserve fund expenses. They weren't transferred
Not a
somewhere else.
transfer, no.
Okay, and then we put the number at 100,000 for 23, and the basis for that, what were the assumptions going into
Where-
more than double it?
Yeah, what?
So we were in the midst of contract negotiations. We hadn't settled with one union. So we had to account and put money aside to deal with that and the outcomes of collective bargaining.
so there's, in those contracts, to add to that, there is a sick leave buyout in those contracts with a max of $5,000.
I was just going to ask, what's the value of all the accrued time now that, if everybody quit today, what's the pay? Right? And what's the
Please don't do
likelihood-
that to me, Littleton.
Yeah, because on this page here, it shows we have 700 some odd employees, right? So
Yes.
if,
So with the four unions, the sick leave buyout, we got a sick leave policy out of it, and they can have 50% of their sick time with a maximum dollar amount of $55,000 per employee.
so what's that total to?
So-
And the likelihood of people quitting, because you guys have.
Some people here, shorter times, they don't have, it's,
Last year was 63,805.
Okay.
And that's just the town, not including the
63,000.
school. Yeah.
Okay. And then where did that go? Because that didn't go in the 40,000, so where did it go?
No, that's just your, if everybody quit tomorrow, you're asking,
Oh,
I'm giving you
okay.
the dollar value.
And I guess we have a number of what are our estimates on what we think people are going to quit? Because we have like number of new hires, 217. So in our head, we must be doing the math. We have this many employees, we estimate this many are going to leave, we're going to have to replace this many. So have you guys done the math around that 100,000? I guess the easy question is, have you done the math around 100,000 and how much should be spent this year?
So what we do is at the end of the year, I look at all the math based on how much sick, depending on what we've negotiated, how much vacation, and I give that to the auditors, and it's actually reported in our financial statement.
So that's 100,000.
so Al, if I can, so anytime somebody retires, what we'd like to first hit is within their own budget. There's going to be a period of time where there's going to be a vacancy. So hopefully, we like to be able to offset buyouts with the vacancy time in those positions. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and you get lucky and you get to hire somebody right away, so you don't get to make up that time. That's where the personnel reserve would come in handy. So the fact that we're not there this year and we have lost people is because we've been able to absorb the expenses within the current operating budget because of the vacancies, salary savings.
No, just because I think I'm on the same page as him, where we're taking 100,000 down by 40,000 to 60 to move it into other lines, and we may take it down further, down to 35, to move it to another line. But we had a basis to come up with that 100,000. I mean, granted, it's been zero to date, but I'm just trying to understand the logic. Is 35 enough in that number? If 60 moved down to 35, is that enough?
It wasn't my recommendation and the finance director's recommendation to add back in the part-time salary. So the $20,000, we shifted $40,000 total, $20,000 for employee recognition, $20,000 to a tuition reimbursement. Hopefully the goal is to attract and retain employees. At this time, we didn't recommend that part-time position. So while we were fortunate the prior year that we didn't need to tap into it, it doesn't mean that we don't have a number of retirements in a given year that we would need to do that.
So if I can tag on what one of the folks said earlier, I think this would be an example of something of, let's put it on the list, and, and we'll prioritize it, and if we, can scare up another 25 from wherever, then we see what items on the list we can make. At that point, and it's going to be sooner than we think, at that point, we can then make a decision, can we take it out of the 60? That's the process. So we do it on a, it's always triage, but it's a request, we put it on the list, we see what we have at the end, and then we deal with it.
Right.
That seems great. Like, oh my God, it makes so much sense.
And I do want to let you know that position does exist right now. So you're taking away that something does exist. It is not filled with an employee that has HR skill set, but that was the goal this year, effective 1/1, was to make it an HR administrative assistant solely, more than a senior tax worker. I just wanted to
Not denying
let
it's a
you
great
know.
position.
No, I know.
In any means.
I know. I like to give the history.
Absolutely.
So the position's been approved, but it's unencumbered right now. It will
It's
remain
encumbered, it's encumbered by a senior tax worker who we changed from a senior tax worker to an employee.
Gotcha.
But I need more than that.
Yep.
We need more HR-related skill set.
So technically, nobody's losing a job by eliminating that position.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I guess just a quick question on the tuition reimbursement, employee recognition. I mean, obviously great things to add in for attracting people, but do you have kind of a framework for how you run those? Is it like,
So that's what I said, we'd have to come up, there are other towns that do programs like that you could gather policies together to make one policy that fits your organization, which I would recommend doing.
Okay.
So we would have to pull that together.
All right,
This is also one of my goals on the select board as well, is to create a reward type program, so this falls in line with.
It does. Yeah, it all makes sense, just, having that clarity so managers and everyone know.
Build it and make it, see what we can do with it.
Yeah, the
I think
framework-
everyone sorry.
The framework of the program has to still be worked out.
Okay,
But
right.
in theory, it's really investing in our current employees, those that are in a lower position, giving the opportunity to get a better skill set with education and so forth, trainings and et cetera, and be able to groom our next,
Yep.
whatever department and position, maybe coming from an assistant.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, yeah, and we have plenty of time to figure it out before the start of the fiscal.
We do.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not, those programs like that, we had talked about, we need to stay ahead of it, right? We need to stand out and we need to get ahead of how do we keep people here, how do we recruit people? We need to stand out from the competition.
Thanks. Any other questions?
One last question. Is there a chart somewhere to get to the 780 people, showing all the different departments?
To be honest with you, I started making one because prior to my time, I think those numbers, I don't know where they came from. So I have started tracking new hires. I've started tracking how many employees do we have, all of that stuff. So I am creating one.
That would be good to get, for one of these meetings to kind of see where all the employees sit, whether they're part-time, full-time, pension eligible, benefits eligible.
That's what I'm making.
Because this budget, your budget's pretty light for 1,000 employees.
A lot of those are senior tax workers, the state employees.
So they're employees, but they're part-time. Okay, so that'd be good to see the different buckets, yeah.
That number includes seasonal, temporary, senior tax workers, everybody.
So it'd be good to kind of see that, yeah.
Yep.
Through the chair, so I'm running on right now on an annual comprehensive financial report, which will give 10 years of full-time FTEs by type, but that's coming later.
I have two questions before we move on. The professional services other, could you explain what exactly you're using the professional services for?
Sure. So in the past, the reduction, I reduced it by 10,000 from the original ask, which was part of that savings, we'll call it, of 18,388. But reason being was that was used to pay our interim HR director. So if you have a situation like that where you need an interim in another department, if you need an assessment center, fire chief assessment center, and say fire didn't budget for it, types of things like that, my department would assist another department in paying for.
Okay, and then the education and professional development, that's also
Same.
something that's,
We put that in back in, I think,
no,
18.
I'm not, So from my perspective, when you read this, it's really hard to tell what the HR-related expenses are versus the town-related expenses, and just separating out the ones that are actually encumbered by your department as opposed to your department on behalf of other departments would be very helpful. Because, I mean, just looking at this, I mean, there's a line that says education, $20,000. That's an awful lot for a two-person department.
And it's not just for my department.
Right, so that's what I'm getting at. And my other question is, you said last year the school funded half a position. Is there talk of doing that again?
No.
Or is that off the table completely?
It is, right now, it's off the table, so the TA recommended to put the 40-hour benefits administrator in the
Okay.
HR department.
Okay, thank you.
But yes, the professional development is townwide.
Okay, so,
We are looking at, we do have options through Maya that we get free training, so we evaluate all that before we go out and dig into them.
So I was going to ask about the $35,000 offset as well. I did have a conversation with Justin McCarthy today, and that's true. It's not being planned on right now, but we can keep beating them up a little bit. The other question was relative to the personnel. This might be for you, Anthony. Reserve fund. When and how do we replenish that? Because if we're sucking it down to 60 or 40 or whatever, $35,000.
It's an annual appropriation, so if we don't use it, it would flow to free cash. So if by some chance we had a year that we used all of it, then we'd be trying to see what we can absorb with other departments, make year-end adjustment entries, and if necessary, we'd be looking for the transfer from the reserve fund.
Okay.
From the reserve fund under the control of the Fincom. That 350, I think it's 350,000 reserve fund. Is that an audience in the chat?
No. So if there's $100,000 in it now, we're drawing it down 20 and 20. So we're at 60. If at the end of the year we don't draw any more, that rolls into free cash.
Correct.
We must establish a reserve fund for next year's budget, right or wrong?
Right, so we'd start with the same base numbers that we did
It would be the same
this
numbers.
year, yeah.
Okay, all right. I guess that's the question. Do we replenish it back up to the starting point, or
Unless we find out and we know different
a
information.
run rate year over year is
We
much
know
lower
that
than that?
there's 5 people, major departments that are gonna retire and we're not gonna have enough, then
Okay.
we might bump it up that year or.
Right. The only difference, like for fiscal '23 was 100,000, for '24 we're talking 60, Chuck, so, right.
So just one more point to the slide, my requests bring no difference to the budget from the recommendation of the TA. There's no dollar amount difference, it's just moving from expenses to wages. And then the final slide, so we were hoping if that 19-hour position gets put back in, we would like to continue building the department. There is a lot reasoning in speaking with the superintendent. There is a lot that over the last couple years before my time in the HR generalist, that the payroll, school payroll administrator and the superintendent's secretary took on over the years. That really is our HR functions that really should be under the HR office. In order to take those back, you know, we need to staff it appropriately to be successful. So we would look to continue to build it, and like Diane, I don't have any capital needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question? In the past, we've had some employees, and I think in particular the police or fire chief, I think it was police, were understaffed enough that they weren't really, because of COVID and all this, weren't able to take enough PTO so that they were going to lose their carryover. So we made allowances, which I think was the right thing to do, to let them do more carryover. Do we know, are we likely to see that again or anymore?
I haven't seen any requests like that. There was one in the beginning of the fiscal year, but that was due to something that happened internally in the system that was approved, but it was not, I have not seen a group of individuals or even individual requests coming forward for that.
Okay, because besides just the fiscal it's like, we want our people to stay fresh. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
Mark. Ooh, handouts.
Handouts, yes. Don't panic.
Not in my plan.
Yeah, all of this is new money.
Old school. And typed.
Used his abacus. Smith and Wesson. Smith and Wesson used to type. Smith and Wesson.
Oh my God. That's not too far.
Good evening. So, starting off with the LCTV major accomplishments.
Mark, this is page 210 for everybody.
No problem. So just putting, every month I do a monthly report for our Cable Advisory Committee, and adding up all the hours on average that we do per government meetings, 26.2 hours of meetings per month. That's a lot of meetings. We got the Sturts Room up and running and broadcasting live, which was a good accomplishment for us. We'd like to promote all town departments through LCTV, which we've tried to reach out to fire, police, highway, library, park and rec, COA, just to name a few off the top of my head. And then we successfully negotiated 2 franchise agreements with both Comcast and Verizon. Comcast was a 10-year license and Verizon was a 5-year license. For our department goals for fiscal year 2024, there's 4 basic ones, and they don't normally change a lot from year to year. But as always, and these aren't in order of importance, increase volunteer participation. We are a volunteer-run studio, so we have workshops for free where we teach people how to run the equipment and hopefully produce programming and content of their own. So we have those planned as usual. So number 2, though, that's what this handout kind of will address. Work with the finance department on the FY25 budget adjustments. And so if you look at this sheet, this is something I prepared for the Cable Advisory Committee, and I'm not good with numbers, as Michelle will attest to, and maybe Alicia too. But this is how my mind thinks, and I thought if I could present this to my board and they would understand it, then I think I did all right. And they did. So if you're looking at this first column here, the 24 department budget, the grade areas, the first 3 lines, that's our revenue, what we expect to take in from Comcast, Verizon, and our IMA with Boxborough. Comcast and Verizon are flexible. Those are estimates. We don't know exactly what we'll take in from year to year. Boxborough is pretty solid. We negotiate that figure. So going all the way down the bottom, you see another grayed out area. So that's the total of those 3 columns. 268,000 is what we estimate to take in for revenue. If you add up all the other expense columns, except for the starred one down the bottom, and I'll get to that in a second, you come up with $364,870. That's all the expenses, salaries, benefits, and expenses. So the difference between what we take in and what we spend is $96,870. And we take, if you slide over to the right of that $96,000, you'll see what says PEG balance of 340,956. That's what we have in our piggy bank. So we take the 96,000, the difference, we take it out of the piggy bank at the end of the year. And that's how we get the money to fund our department. Now, earlier I had presented to, a couple of years ago actually, I said that at some point we would like to see the town start to take over some of our funding and maybe start with the benefits portion. And I had approached Anthony earlier, and he said this is probably not the year to do that, so I understand. So that's why, just for a run rate, if we kept at this pace, we'd about 3 years, we'd deplete our piggy bank. But if the town takes on the funding of the benefits, and you see I totaled the benefits down below, it's 88,000, then the difference now, instead of 96,000, is just 8,000. Call it 9,000, round up. And at that run rate, it's about 37 years. But, you know, I don't think it'll be 37 years. It might be 36. But anyway, you can see we're much more self-sustaining when the town chips in a little bit to help out our department. And so part of our, going back to this other sheet, oh, by the way, just that little start thing, the annual capital funding, 48,333, that's money that was negotiated through the Comcast and Verizon license. That's money we get every year for capital equipment. And so we put it in our operating expenses as a line item, but technically we don't have to spend it, but it's there in case we do. If we don't, it goes back into our piggy bank. So I didn't include it in the expense line because we may not spend it, so.
Excuse me, Mark, the 48,000?
Yeah.
For capital, if you don't use it, you can hold it over to the next year and you get another 48-ish thousand.
That's right.
So what do you have in that capital piggy bank at this point? Anything?
All the money goes in the same piggy bank, the 340,000
Okay, so-
balance. Everything, whether it's, even if it was once designated for capital expenses, it goes back into the bucket. So it's never been separate into a separate capital only item. That's kind of the way our fund works. And the license doesn't specifically say we have to spend it on capital, but we've always taken it to mean that.
Okay, okay.
Yes, if I may, so I think one of the dangers, this is from being on the committee, we run into is this 48,333. We start to count on it, right, for to balance this out, and that shouldn't really be the case. I mean, we look at a new, I think is there a new van in your request for capital? Is it coming up?
Coming up, yeah.
Yeah, so
don't steal my thunder.
All right, I'll try not to, but things like that could be bought through that capital would make a lot of sense. You know, driving that old Scooby-Doo van. We could put in, this money could pretty much pay for something like that. But it needs to keep going into the PEG, for obvious reasons, because we're going to run this balance down and we're going to end up forced providing benefits, either paying for benefits or something else, or we're going to have to get more creative with programming and things. So I think it's... Yeah, sure. Oh, no, I think so. Mark had asked the board if we should kind of even put that on there because it can be confusing, but I think it's, it looks like a great number that we can just keep using, but we've got to be very careful with that money because there are capital, obviously, expenses. That's why it exists.
Yeah.
And if I could tag on that, I mean, one of the things I was asked later was, I think it's great that you're adding more meetings, covering more meetings, but there's also a bunch of things, a bunch of boards that aren't covered, you know, particularly things like Light and Water, and since they meet someplace else, I'm guessing that might be a great use of capital to be over there, and I guess, so there's that, and then I wondered, a select board question, do you all have a policy of, hey, we're gonna try to get all the boards on TV?
We have not discussed that.
Yeah. I mean, it's becoming more and more relevant. Obviously, since COVID, it's. I think we're going to be able to lean probably more towards that now. That we've been tinkering with other. What's the system?
Owl.
Owl. Yeah. to get some of these smaller boards to, are you going to speak to that, or am I stealing more thunder?
I can speak to that. if you
Yeah,
like.
please.
Well, one thing, Brian, is that, there could be an unfunded mandate coming down from the governor's office and the State House that says that they want all meetings covered. And they don't care how you do it, just do it. And if that's the case, then, I'll probably be before you much more often than I am once a year. But, so if that's the case, though, we'd have to go with, like Gary had mentioned, an owl. It's a teleconferencing looks like an owl, sits in the middle of the table. It shoots 360 degrees. It's very basic, but it gets the job done as far as covering meetings. So if it comes down to that, we couldn't just have staff available to use the good stuff, I guess you could say, like these rooms, because it's just, first of all, not enough. If all the boards and committees met every night of the week in a room that we have cameras in, we'd run out of rooms. So, but, we understand the importance of it, and, in our small way, we like to think we're responsible for the short town meetings we have, because people are so well informed. They watch the meetings, they get to town meeting, there's nothing left to say. They've seen it all, they've had their chance to watch it, to know what's going on, so.
Oh yeah, no, stipulate you guys should, you folks are doing a great job. I think we'd all agree with that. I'm just, I think, agreeing with the notion that I would love to see every meeting such that I can watch it on my computer at some point.
So
I will expect you in my next workshop.
So Mark and I have talked about this in the past. The library has an owl now, and one of them, and the trustees' meetings are recorded by the owl and then sent over to LCTV. And we talked about how to get all the other boards to do this. It's just we haven't figured out the right process or the right schedule, or are we allowing the owl to leave the library, or is it part of the library? Does LCTV have one? How many of them do you need? And there's a lot of issues like that.
Right?
That is the one I think you're talking about. That is LCTV.
Oh, I thought that was, okay. I thought the library was going to buy one. So
they were thinking about it, but they haven't done it yet.
So.
Yeah, we purchased that with town's funds, if I may. So, Mark made a great point that we all have to realize that at some point in time, the town is going to have to absorb more of this budget. Why? I think that we all see, people getting rid of cable, right? And the more people that do that and go to YouTube and so forth, that means less fees that we can expect. So we're constantly talking about, we need to look at reinventing, because we all love what LCTV does. But that revenue source, I fully expect that to come down. And if we want to continue with the same level of service that I'm hearing right here, it's going to have to absorb more of the town funds down the road. So it's coming. And just for the fact that, every year he's cutting into it this year by $88,000. If he doesn't use the capital money, okay, we replenished half of that, but there's an end life for that, right? So we have to be prepared for that. So, this is something where if we want to continue with the same great service that LCTV provides, we're going to have to look at town funds to help pay for that.
And we may have to buy some more owls. And I will be happy to volunteer to do some technical help.
Awesome, that's great, thank you, appreciate that.
Is that 48,000 a fixed amount, which is connected to the contracts with Verizon and Comcast?
Yes, we got $15,000 a year from Comcast over 10 years, and we get $33,333 from Verizon for 5 years.
And I assume that each time you renegotiate are getting lower, and that's why the PEG fund is diminishing?
No, those numbers went up. What is going lower is in 2017 or 16, we had 3,236 customers subscribing to Comcast and Verizon. 3,236. In 2022, we have 2,498. So, that's a pretty good drop of
30,
people cutting the
40%,
cord.
yeah.
But the cable companies keep raising the rates. So we haven't seen the real dip in our numbers that go along with the loss of customers, because price keeps going up.
They're going to get their profit.
But I can't imagine that, with technology changing, streaming services being much more popular, I just assume that, the doom and gloom we had been predicting for the past 10 years will somehow rear its ugly head.
We've talked about actually trying to look at selling advertising space to help offset the cost. So Mark and I are in the team, finance team, we're constantly finding ways of maybe a potential new revenue source for LCTV.
Can I ask her? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
This piggy bank that you have, is that all built up from this capital funding over the years that has gone in there?
Yes, the majority of it was before the town took over running the studio. I was actually still there as a Comcast employee, but each year we were able to save a significant amount of money because the company paid for my account towards the totals. And you can see when somebody chips in $80,000, for benefits and other things, we don't spend a lot on expenses, really.
But had you used this money to upgrade and get the latest and greatest,
Yeah.
you would not have this piggy bank now, and we'd already be at this point.
Well, we did have $750,000 when I took over, $750,000. We spent $350,000 right away upgrading the studio, completely refurbishing it. I don't know if you ever remember what it looked like before and after, but that included the demolition of it and rebuilding of it, and also new equipment. So that took a chunk out. But then, like I said, we've been able to, I think last year was the first year that we actually had to take out from the piggy bank at the end of the year. So even prior to that, we've been adding to it. So.
Thank you.
Should I continue?
One quick question. We get 73,000 from Boxborough. Could you just ballpark roughly how much of your time or the department's time is in Boxborough versus Littleton?
The IMA specifies 10 hours of time
Per
for one employee.
Week.
Per week?
Per week, yeah.
Okay.
10 hours a week.
Thank you.
All right, so continuing on with department goals for next year. We do plan on replacing some portable gear with the 48,000 from the capital line item. And also just, we've heard that from various people that there's no newspaper in town and things like that. So one of the things that we're going to be doing, we're actually starting prior to FY24 is a weekly or every other week show with the town administrator, where he would give the news of the town, what's happening, bring in some guests, kind of make it interesting but also informative, let people know, what's happening in town. So that's just step one of hopefully more ways to get the message out of what's happening in town.
Does that include traffic, weather, and sports?
Everything.
Yeah,
It's like
okay.
Gary Ganoes. No news is good. No news is good news.
All right. So you can see the total wages and expenses, 413,203. Am I on the right slide? No, I'm not. Okay. I skipped. All right, so these are the things that we planned to do through our 10-year capital plan. This was actually something that was on for last year, but with COVID and everything, we just kind of bumped it a year. It's quite possible that we may not do all the things on this list. Again, we do set money aside, and we're going to be voting on these items at town meeting, but we may not do them. And that's because things change. And one of the things, the LMS fiber run was to connect the gymnasium at the middle school to the cafetorium, because at the time when we made the 10-year plan, we were doing several overflow crowds. And in order to do that, you had to run cabling all through the hallways, and it was just a pain. So we thought, why not run a permanent line between the two spaces. We just plug in the wall and you're good to go. We may still do that because you never know when at the last moment something comes up and they need the overflow, and at least it would be a lot easier to set up that way. The other thing is like a cloud/archival migration. That's a two-part thing. One of them is to increase the look of our on-demand service. Right now, it's kind of clunky. If you go there, that's probably the big complaint that people have, is that it's not very user-friendly. The new cloud service that we are going to be getting will look and feel more like YouTube. So people are familiar with that. It's a lot easier to control with the controls and the way programs are sorted and how you find things. And then the other part of the archival migration would be to, we understand the value of keeping things on file for not only for historical purposes, but also sometimes we have lawyers and other people want to look at a planning board meeting from 2015. And we only keep so much because of the space, cloud storage space online. We only keep so many years of programming on there. So we're looking at another spot. It's archive, I think it's gov.org or something. It's something free. So it's not the fact that we need money out of capital to pay for the space. What we need the money to is to hire somebody to take all the old stuff and transfer it on. And you know, some of it's on VHS tapes. You remember those, Jerry?
I do.
Yeah, and other media. So, you know, that's probably what that expense would be for.
Before you leave the capital, is there any capital for the senior center? Or is that coming out of the senior center budget?
We hope that's coming out of the senior center.
That's the goal. Obviously, we're seeing what he has for funds. We're hoping to be able to absorb that part of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the senior center one is not as robust as some of the other rooms, so it's
Right. It's not like here.
Yeah.
We'll have something, but not to this degree.
Going back to the HS thing.
We'll go back to the HS, yes.
The next slide, I put there that's not applicable that anything was cut from my request, even though I had discussed with Anthony about taking on the funding, but I think more discussion needed to be had before he sprung it on you this time. Plus, you know, I'm part of the meetings where I hear how much we were struggling this year in different areas and things needed to be cut. So we do have the money in our piggy bank to at least float us another year, so we're pushing that down the road. Let's see. I kind of went over some of this stuff already, but just some things we might be looking at replacing in the next 5 years. Technology changes. It's hard to believe that, you know, the iMacs that we got 2 years ago or 3 years ago are getting close to ancient, you know, and at some point between Sierra and, you know, every other mountain range they come up with, they're no longer compatible with the systems we have. So anyway, those things have to be replaced. And then, as Gary mentioned, a new production van to replace the Marshmallow, although I do like the mystery mobiles too. We've been talking about, you know, there's discussion about our van. If you build it, you know, they will come, you know, that saying from Field of Dreams. If we built a real nice production van, would we use it more out in the field, shooting various things? Because right now we don't do a lot of in-field production. I do the football games, but I lug everything in my car. And we do graduation, we bring the van down for that. But we don't sit in the van, we usually go up in the press box or something. So we don't have a van that has like a mobile studio in it. Part of the problem of that is that you need a place to park it. You need a controlled environment. You're going to keep equipment over there, and you need, you know, security around it. And those are three things that right now we don't have. So, you know, the bottom line is really we just need a van so that we don't have to carry the stuff in our own vehicles, and something a little bit more reliable than the Marshmallow. Marshmallow's a 2004. So we're hoping that we would get maybe discussion with the police department, maybe if they're turning in some of their old vehicles, a nice souped-up SUV with, you know, cop suspension, cop, you know.
Turbo.
My Blues Brothers reference.
Get a new lighter.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
God.
Glad somebody got that. So just to put that on your radar. Also, I didn't put on the 5-year plan, but I just want to mention the Tuttle House because it was floated around there when there's talk about what to do with the Tuttle House, that possibly that could be a landing spot for the new LCTV studio. So if that's part of the 5-year plan, I don't know, we're pushing that out to 10 years now. Just want to put that on people's radar too, that we are interested if we start to talk about that. Very interested in the Tuttle House.
Mark, if you were to do that, that's going to take capital.
Yes.
So do you see that as basically using all your reserves, or do you know, do Comcast and Verizon chip in for those kinds of major expenses, or do you, would you expect the town to be the funding vehicle for something like that?
Well, if it took 5 years and we have to renegotiate a new Verizon deal, it's possible that we could ask them, because sometimes they do stuff like that. They lay out a certain amount for capital studio investment, you know, bigger amounts.
Is that something that you could breach the subject with them and say, you know, we've got a contract, but we're, you know, it might be 3 years or it might be 5 years or whatever, you know, are you guys interested in helping us out, or?
I could. I do have a couple of contacts for both, and just to see, to get some feelers out there. In all honesty, I would think that it would be all rolled into the big old package of the King Street project, and just find a way to fund it within that same mechanism.
Okay.
Just a question, I don't know the term, telehouse?
That's across from CVS, the old, the building's kind of like Bugs Bunny's place when they built the freeway around it.
Right.
Sorry, another.
It's on the IBM property, next to the orchard.
The greenhouse.
Yeah.
Across from the.
So that's part of the acquisition that Lapoli Companies purchased. That's part of the IBM property. There was some discussion around the possibility of it being donated to the town.
I think he doesn't want to own it.
Sorry, I misheard. It's the Telly House, but I was...
Tuttle
House. I heard Telly House, and I'm like, oh, this is a tech term I don't know. It's like the tech tower.
Tuttle House.
Have you heard of it? Thank you. Yeah.
Have you heard of the Tuttle House?
What?
Have you heard of the Tuttle House before? Have you ever heard of that? The Tuttle House?
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I had said it clearly, you would have heard it.
No, I just hear everything techie.
I'm trying to go fast. Usually I'm 10 minutes with this thing, and I know I'm the guy who makes up the time. So we did that slide, yes?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
good. Next, I think that's it.
Okay.
Great.
Any questions?
I have just a minor thing, that your Medicare tax is probably miscalculated because it can't be the same in 23 as it is in 24. So,
That's because I adjusted his salaries later, so I'll go back and do that.
so it's probably,
I could be running off could be a day-old list. You know, sometimes these things change daily with, so, yeah. All right. Well,
Thank you very much.
Mark, one thing I appreciate is seeing the balance on your pay, because it gives us a 3-year heads up on what's going to happen, whether we like it or not. So I think that's excellent to see those numbers. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Next up is the assessor's office. So Kathy can't be here tonight. She is unfortunately under the weather.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you,
So
Mark.
that is on page 77 of your book, and Alicia is going to take this one on.
some major accomplishments in the assessor's office is they completed their data manual per DOR directives. They did training and education of the new assistant assessor in all aspects of the assessor's office. She's been picking up extremely quickly and is even helping our office. Exceptional year for all inspections, including cyclical sale permits reflected in the new growth value. Assisted in updating senior veteran work-off program. We did that with Liz. We actually had to sit around with the workers and explain the new process and how it works and made sure it is in compliance with the law and following the IGR. We continued the pursuit of appraising services to ensure commercial industrial properties are assessed according to market, and the field lister office assistant vacancy was filled. The department goals, successful and timely fiscal year 24 recertification, work with Patriot to ensure commercial land values are fair market value, complete neighborhood directive by reconfiguring existing neighborhoods, finish municipal land review and combination of vacant parcels, education of the assistant assessor and field lister, and process manual for all procedures performed by the assessing office. So I know she's been working very diligently on that for her office. Nothing for capital. The assessor's office has one vehicle it uses for inspections. It will probably need replacement in the near future. The fiscal year 24 operating budget request highlights an increase for the new salary table that was voted at special town meeting, additional $1,000 for personal property valuation, a transfer of $13,000 from the IT budget for her Canvas system, support and licensing, and a transfer of $4,750 from the IT budget for her Canvas system bridge for permitting. Wages total $241,258, expenses $64,875 for a total of $306,133.
Just to interrupt for a minute,
Yep.
maybe this is a good opportunity because we're going to be seeing more of that, the transfer from IT over into departmental
For
budgets. Can you talk about
transparency
that?
purposes, what we did was any departments that it was only used for their department, we put it into their specific budgets to show the true operating cost of operating that budget.
And you'll see that with other.
But the software is still going to be managed through IT though, right? I mean-
But paid for through each
Correct.
departmental
Right,
budget.
okay, because the reason we put it all together historically was everybody was doing their own little thing and it just sort of got out of hand.
This
so-
is the hybrid of just that, for,
Okay.
so the
I
control stays in
understand from a
IT, but the
financial
money
standpoint
stays.
To understand what the department budgets look like, but as long as we have a professional overseeing it, that's fine. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. For the TA revised operating budget, we didn't adjust anything. Projected 25-29 operating needs, it's just heavily on property taxes for our primary source of revenue. She's a mission-critical office, so just continuing to fund the office as necessary to run. On to accounting.
Page 72.
Before you leave the assessor,
Yes.
I'm going to ask this question on
Sure.
every one. What is the $20,000 for professional services? Professional services is just such a big catch-all, and we have such a big number in all of these things, and we just don't say what's.
So her professional services, and it's mentioned as part of our goals, we're not experts, and even Kathy's as good as she is, and I think she's one of the better assessors in the area. We often need the expertise of consultants or other outside services to help us kind of nail down those valuations with something like Amazon.
Like
And
potpourri,
Potpourri,
where we went through
exactly.
that personal
Personal property
there,
that we're just really starting to have it, and we don't want to lose out on personal property tax that we can get. So that's why we've made an effort to use that professional services to make sure we maximize and everybody pays their fair share.
And she also uses it for ATB consulting. So
Right.
she has to pay a law firm to help her with the ATB
Right, she has an
cases.
ATB lawyer that helps us with cases before the ATB.
ATB is a appellate tax board.
Right.
For people dispute, like if they want to.
Appeal.
So if they file an abatement and we deny their abatement, they have the right to appeal it to the appellate tax board, and then we make our case, and we have our attorney, which is not town council, it's the assessors use somebody who actually was in the appellate tax board, so our attorneys very well knowledgeable of the appellate tax board process.
Someone who really loves tax law.
He really does, yeah. Special person.
Do we have a sense as to what the run rate is this year? We stepped it up pretty good last year to 20,000. Is 20,000 a good number, or is it?
Well, she spent 14,580 in 21, 14,860 in 22, and she's at 11,120 in 23 with an encumbrance of 5,840. So she's already at about 60.
So, okay, we don't know what rate we're running at this year.
Well, she's at
16.
16
We're at
grand.
16, so we're higher than last year, so that's why
Okay.
we're going to get closer to that 20 with the outside help.
Okay.
And also, like that's the second really department in a row that has discussed a vehicle's coming up. We're going to need a vehicle. And I don't remember the exact process we used for transitioning one of the police vehicles that we replace pretty much one a year to the land use, but if those vehicles have a lot of life left in them, granted not life to be speeding all over town at 100 miles an hour, but for what these two departments use them for.
So one thing that we're changing, Gary, with our vehicles is we put in for a F-150 Lightning, a Ford Lightning, which is a pickup truck, which will accommodate two departments, because really you have departments that using these vehicles at a different time. So we don't need a vehicle that somebody's going to use after hours. So with our new policy that we're trying to implement is it's a shared vehicle. It's a town hall pool vehicle.
Yeah.
So this Lightning will be used.
Kind of sign it out, one of the departments
Sign it
signs
out. So Ed, for example, uses it 10 to 1.
Yeah.
So Park and Rec would use it on the weekends, nights. And even we could put, now hearing Mark, we could even put this, a cap on it, and LCTV can use it at night. So, the more, we passing down the old cruisers, we actually almost jeopardized our Green Communities grant, which
Yeah, I
again,
can
this
see
year
that,
we
yeah.
got 74 because the state said to us, you guys are going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So, I think really maximizing the vehicle and not having all
Yeah.
these separate vehicles is probably the most financially best way for the town to move forward.
I would recommend definitely a reservation system, seriously.
Yeah,
for
it's exactly what
Yeah.
it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be under the control probably of the permanent coordinator for land use, and she'll just work that schedule out, and we'll have keys and so forth, so.
But according to your point, Gary, when the hybrids we just bought
Right.
start coming off, then maybe it's time to revisit that again. Right.
Yeah, and that's something we haven't discussed, I don't think, as a board, or even grilled the chief on. He might not even know. Is their life expectancy the same, 3 years?
At some point in time, the batteries have to be replaced on those, and I'm not quite sure how much a cruiser depreciates that battery with
Yeah.
all the electronics that they
Yeah.
have, so I think that remains to be seen. But, we did see in the two vehicles that we bought last year, 45% reduction in gasoline for those vehicles, which is great. And we're really excited with our current Green Communities grant that we actually were receiving some money for the two hybrids that's in the budget this year. I'm sorry, 3 hybrids. One for the fire chief, who still wasn't able to get his from the fall, so which was great timing because we can use, I think it's 5,000?
You're correct. You're correct.
7,500 per vehicle that we're gonna get off on that, and then we have another 5,000 off of the Lightning. So, that's good stories there.
Thank you.
Great. I'll try to slow down.
Thank you.
I could be a
No,
little
that's all right. I
fast.
just wanted to, I know Kathy's done a lot of work. We're trying to make sure that she maximizes, and make sure that everybody's held to the same level as far as for taxation.
Tonight is accounting,
Page 72, everyone?
and I have Michelle with me tonight, Michelle Reynolds. Major accomplishments for calendar year 2022. We were awarded the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award for the second consecutive year for fiscal year 23 budget. Balance sheet was submitted October, and free cash was certified October 27th for special town meeting. We worked with OSD and the Town Administrator's Office and held multiple training sessions for all employees on procurement and statewide contracts using combis. We gave them all PowerPoint presentations too, so we've been trying to get them more comfortable with ordering off of state contracts. Department goals for fiscal year 2024, reorganize and prioritize filling key positions within finance. As Michelle Vibert spoke earlier, it's extremely difficult to fill positions and recruit people. We've tried multiple times. It's really, really hard. Streamline budget process for departments with additional training and utilizing a web-based platform. We send them slides, we send them instructions, but they still sometimes, everybody learns differently, whether it be hearing, seeing, touching, so we'd like to give more training on how to put in the budget. And we'd like to start using a web-based platform for the budget, which would be easier for them to use. Additional munis training for all departments and rollout of Tyler cashiering as an internal control within the treasurer's office. No capital budget requests at this time, but I'd like to notate I did reach out to Nancy. We use PACE training for munis. It's $6,000 a year. We have $4,000, so we need $12,000 more, especially with us upgrading into a new platform, either, I think, early next year. We'd like to have that PACE training available to people so they can go on and learn how to use the different modules. No revised capital budget requests, other than that $12,000 ask. Meeting table and chairs for small conference room in the accounting office. We're now on the 3rd floor. We have a little small conference area. If we had a little bit of tables and chairs, some fireproof filing cabinets, and if we expand out with furniture, if we have another position in the future as the town grows. Salaries and COLA is from the salary table is what increased our wages. So our wages are at $309,471, expenses $80,250 for a total of $397,21. TA revised operating budget adjustment of $3,290. We reduced our intern wages. We have an intern that comes in and helps us. As necessary, they're a senior. So the newly revised wages is $306,181, expenses level at $82,50 for a total of $386,431. As the town grows, increased personnel is necessary, is what I put in for our operating needs, and increase for steps and COLA. I'll go back in case you have any questions.
I have a question. In the narrative on page 74, the last paragraph says the expense budget is increasing by $10,000, but it's not reflected as the narrative just old.
Sorry, I apologize, Mark.
On the bottom of page 74,
Yep.
the last paragraph says, the accounting department expense budget is increasing by $10,000, but the budget's not reflecting that. So the narrative is just old? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, we just need to update. So we were still making changes really quick, and we were trying to get the budget book created as fast as possible, so we might have to go and make a few changes.
Okay.
The $12,000 you mentioned, Alicia, that you're talking to Nancy about, is that something that is a possible future ask, or is that reflected?
That's a current ask for 24.
Is that?
I don't have it put in there, I'm literally just asking. It's not there.
Oh, got it, yeah, so that's an ask to add to the
Yeah.
budget. That's your ask to add to the
Yeah.
budget as proposed currently. Okay.
Question, just going back to the headcount request earlier, it would be good to see that, because we have a couple comments on how the town population is increasing and headcount needs to increase or is increasing. It'd be good to see how that's increased in line with the population, because you can see it increased about 10% over the last 10 years or so. So how did headcount increase? Did headcount increase about 10%, or has it been 25%?
Okay.
I have just a couple other questions again. What are you doing under, what is your professional services budget for?
My professional services.
You cut it from 11,000 to 10,000.
Yes. So for that one, we're using it for web-based services, so we would like to roll out ClearGov budget platform.
Okay. And under wages other, what is wages other?
Wages other is our hourly intern.
Okay, thank you.
What is hourly wages then? Right above it, $10,000 for hourly wages.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's what I thought I was referring to, those 5280. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, I thought you were talking about the one above it, which is wages hourly. Okay, wages hour other is my stipends, I apologize.
Okay.
And wages hourly is the intern.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Treasurer is page 80.
Major accomplishments for the Treasurer's Office, they maintained the AAA bond rating. They completed the funding plan for the library. They worked with the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust and Water Department, Lewiston Electric Light and Water, to secure a $24.5 million financing for the water treatment plant on Whitcomb Ave. Department goals for fiscal year '24 is to successfully transition new staff with education and cross-training, continue process improvements to maximize accuracy and efficiency. So with the interim treasurer's institutional knowledge, which is extremely valuable, we're trying to get as much as we can to improve processes.
He sounds like a great guy.
Sorry.
There's no capital budget requests at this time, nothing revised, nothing projected. For operating budget request highlights, our salaries are increasing in accordance with the salary table for
Excuse me,
yes.
The tax title, collections,
Sorry, tax title collection has,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, not good. 9,275 down to 125.
And this year it's 566,000, so.
So,
It's a factor of who goes into tax title and how quickly they'd like to pay.
It's just highly variable.
so you're,
It's very variable, yes.
so the expectation of 125
So the estimate was
versus
175 for
90,
23, the actual so far is 566 plus. So
Okay.
I think it's a factor of the great treasurer that's sitting there right now. Better now.
Yeah, there's a fantastic interim treasurer in that.
We have a badass treasurer. Right? So see what the new guy can do. Okay.
One payroll benefits coordinator position is being moved from HR to Treasury. This position will process and reconcile all employee benefits in conjunction with the Assistant Treasurer Payroll Manager. There's an increased conference and meetings and a decrease in professional services. So wages are $318, $399, expenses at $24,600 for a total of $342,999. Any questions on this slide for you?
That's the position that was moved from HR?
Correct.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask before Mark does, what is professional services? Just to sound smart.
And I can tell you in previous years,
Yeah.
it was mostly used for the HR side of the treasurer's. For this year, what we put money in there for was specifically for any specialized training that the new treasurer would need when they come in, especially munis training, or if we need to pay an outside consultant to come in, transition between me and whoever's hired.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. TA revised operating budget, increased the treasurer collector salary to step 6, reflecting an increase of $5,140 to attract talent. Wages are now $323,539, expenses at $24,600 for a total of $348,139.
Is it currently step 5?
Yes.
Is that enough?
We
I mean, will that be enough to attract talent?
Wait, could you go back?
2 steps.
I'm not following what that even means. So what are we doing here?
The changing the step of
So
the
normally we
position?
just budget to the third step, I think,
Correct.
maximum. So if you look at if the select board's meeting, the last hires, we haven't been able to hire under that, so we really need to It's a job market that favors the employee right now, so we're actually paying more, and we have less to choose from in some of these positions, so there's no way that we're gonna hire a treasurer at step 3, so we needed to bump it up to at least make it,
Worth applying.
yeah.
Is it possible to put in these job announcements, the entire salary range?
We do.
Okay, and then stating that in there, it states that we typically hire, or you would be hired at this.
Right, we do anticipated salary ranges, we do 1 to 3 with the full salary range of this. So this way, if you have somebody who is really experienced,
Yeah.
and they realize that there's more room to grow,
Yeah.
then they may put in for it, and then we have that luxury of
Well, we
going
could,
to the select board to ask them to hire them about which
just
step 3.
a tweak on words, so we could just play it as salary negotiable after, selection, right? We have the whole band to work with. If we just left it that,
Commensurate with
I mean,
experience.
that's based on the old personnel bylaw, correct?
No, even with the current employee handbook, we want to show the range, right?
Yeah,
We
of
want,
course.
we want people to, fully know what you're getting into as far as salary-wise. And we don't want to waste their time, and we don't want to waste our time by interviewing 5 people, and then all of a sudden you tell them the salary, and they say, oh, no, I'm not interested. So by putting that out there, it helps let them know and us know that they're within our range. Where, that remains to be seen.
So now you're saying expected 1 to 6, and then the total range is the whole band?
Right.
Okay.
Well, we're still saying 1 to 3, but
Oh.
we're just being realistic, and we're not gonna end up hiring somebody at step 1 through 3. It's highly doubtful.
But you could, I'm just saying, you could hire somebody at step 10, if
could,
that's what we
we
get.
have.
I mean, you're pulling someone, if you pull someone from a city, I mean,
Right.
so I think, I'm not sure why we have to put step 6. That's all. I'm not gonna get into that. We talked this on the select board meeting.
Yeah, it's just to have a budgeted salary amount. If we end up
So this
hiring
is-
somebody at step 10, that means we don't have enough in the treasurer's budget, right?
Okay, so this is strictly a budget
This is
placement.
It's just a budget
All right.
replacement, yeah, that's all.
I think, for the town moving forward, I think we need to try and get away from bringing people, especially with the grid going up the way it did, get away from people coming in here at step 10, because it handcuffs us moving forward for those
Sure,
positions.
but we don't.
And
we
we're
don't-
always trying to say, okay,
Yeah.
we'll take you off grid and we'll do this and this and this. It's kind of a bad habit to get into.
Right.
I know we're trying to find the right person for these positions, but you really have to weigh how much the town can afford in the long
Right.
run. Because these salaries, don't forget, are gonna be growing
Right.
3 to 5% per year.
Right.
You know,
Plus
when you
benefit
start
pension.
steps and COLAs, it's a lot.
And it goes into play what we talked about earlier about the tuition reimbursement, employee recognition. It's really grooming from within, right? Because then we have a little bit more control over that number than needing to go to the outside.
I mean, it really killed me to put step 6 to this and take it from a 3 to a 6. But again, like Anthony said, you're trying to be realistic with stuff.
Yeah.
So I will say I'm a little confused because in the budget book, it shows the variance between 23 and 24 for that salary being $238, not $51.40. And it shows that the assistant treasurer's salary is actually going down.
The original budget increase was the 51, whatever it is. The salary from last year making more than,
Step
yeah,
6.
he was,
Okay,
he
yeah.
was like a step 7 or something on the old grid.
Okay, thank you.
We ready to move on? The collectors on page 83.
Major accomplishments for the collector's office. They successfully began 4 mailings a year for real estate and personal property to maximize collection rates, which has resulted in a 6% increase for the first 5 months of the fiscal year. Department goals: educate the public on using community self-serve as another way to get tax information. No capital requests, no 5-year requests at this time. The operating budget request highlights increased salary for and coordinates with salary table for steps and COLA, longevity for the tax collector, and level funded expenses. Wages totaled $89,102, expenses $39,050 for a total of $128,152.
And other
126.
services of 34,000 is what?
Sorry?
They don't have professional services, they call it other. So what is the other services we're getting for $34,000?
They're not
Other
law
services is you receive your tax bills in the mail.
Yeah, it's probably what, lockbox, Steve?
Send those out, we send those out,
Kelly
times a
Ryan?
year.
the deputy collector prints them and mails them. Plus it's the lockbox service that they started. And if you noticed, or you will notice, we used to, no, you should have noticed, we used to send out a combined bill for the first and second quarter. Now it's a separate bill. That's helped with the collection efforts.
Okay,
That's an extra mailing there and printing.
thank you.
And she also used it for advertising for tax taking. Okay.
Didn't you mention some of the employees on that 700 were collectors as external contractors? Or is that correct?
Deputy collectors?
Well, I can't remember what they were.
The employees? the
Yeah,
insurance,
yeah.
Senior workers, seasonal workers, Park and Rec.
And those aren't in, Park and Rec, but I thought, okay, I thought I heard collector in there. No, okay, my bad. Never mind.
Deputy tax collector, Steve said. Is that,
Yeah, but not as part of it, not an employee.
no, not an employee.
Not
That's the
employee.
service. That's
No,
the
it's a
other
service that,
Kelly Ryan.
Third party.
third-party service, right. You see that if you don't pay your excise tax, we ship it off to Deputy Ryan, and
Got
he
it.
adds a fee and
Okay.
chases it down for us.
Just as a budget book cleanup item, on page 84, it says expenses, it shows an increase in postage, but there's no increase in the expenses, so it's just the narrative is wrong.
Okay.
We're not republishing this book, are we? So that,
Well, we do. This is just the draft.
So we make updates. So as we
To the
find
narrative as well.
things, we'll update and we'll have handouts to put in your books at future meetings.
Just for the summit, for the Super Saturday.
okay, that was the,
TA revised operating budget adjustments, reduced other services based upon actual spending trends by $2,000. So wages stayed at 89,102, expenses reduced to 37,050 for a total of 126,152. Again, for projected operating needs, it is another mission-critical office for the finance in order to collect our bills, to send out demand notices, MLCs for sales and refinancing, and 98% of all, collection of all property tax bills. On to Veterans Agent, Veterans Benefit, and Animal Inspector.
Page 158 for the Veterans Agent.
Major accomplishments for 2022 include the completion of the restoration of the World War I Memorial at Shattuck Street, obtaining and installing a gravestone and veterans marker at a veterans grave that never had any stone or marker on the grave, completed inventory of all veterans graves at West Lawn Cemetery in order to update missing and damaged veterans markers or medallions. Total veterans graves inventoried equals 730. Department goals: to ensure that veterans receive the benefits that are available for them from the state or federal government, the VA, or Veterans Administration, and to obtain and place the missing veterans markers or medallions on the graves. No capital requests, nothing projected at this time for the 5-year capital plan. Veterans Agent operating budget request highlights: wages are based on hours for the Veterans Agent, expenses same as prior year, so this was level funded, $8,209 for wages, $11,910 for expenses, for a total of $20,119.
Before we move on, he doesn't get a step increase?
No.
that's something, that's going to be brought before our board. There's been discussion of putting that position on the grid, I believe, Michelle,
It shows him being on the grid down below, so
as far as the
it
step
says
increase.
grade.
Yeah, his
has
is
a grade
based more on
step.
hours,
It
so
is.
that varies. Veterans benefits. Veterans benefits are reimbursed 75% to the town, level funded at $175,000. Continue to fund veterans benefits and veterans agent to best service our veterans for operating needs. Any questions on that before we proceed?
The only other bullet that probably should be listed is Mass General Law requires a full-time veterans agent anytime where the town exceeds a population of 12,000. So we're at, depending on who you talk to, we're at 10.4. I know the town clerk likes to keep us at 9.2, but the state says differently. Yeah, the state says differently. So, you know, we have 1,000 potential units that could be developed in the common over a number of years. So could that be within the 5 years that we need to add that position and make that full-time? Perhaps it's just something to keep in mind that at some point in time, I could see the town requiring, needing to have increase to a full-time.
I mean, historically, we go 1,000 every 10 years without apartment complexes. So I would bet between 5 and 10 years, we're probably going to have the 12.
Yeah, we have 4,000 households right now,
Yeah.
roughly in Littleton, and we have zoning that just allowed an increase of 25%. Probably not not a community in the Commonwealth's done what Littleton has done as far as creating housing.
So even though we only have 15 veterans, let's say 20, at a 25% increase, the state would require a full-time employee with benefits?
Yes, but there's options there. So
Like,
when
Bundle it with EHS or?
well, no, you can go for regional.
Oh, okay.
You get a couple of communities that are in the same boat, and pool it together, and because we still may not need that, but
You also have time to become compliant. It's
Right.
not-
Right. And the Commonwealth's usually very supportive of regionalization of those services because there is an economy of scale when you can share that with other communities.
And there's far more than 20 veterans in Littleton.
I'm just looking at the numbers in the budget book.
So, Anthony, I'm just going to just shoot off to them real quick. I'm working on ACT first, so 2013, you were 8,924, 2014, 9,036, 15, 9,132, 16, 9,246, 17, 9,404, 18, 9,912. Same thing for 19, 9,012 up to 20, and then 21, you became 10,241. 22, 10,227. So you're growing.
So, before we leave the veterans, I had a question on the benefits. Between 22 and 23, we went up 75% and now we're level funding. So did we go up more than we needed to last time? Or are we going to need to go up more now?
For the 175?
Yeah.
We went from, in 22, the number was 101,885. In 23, we budgeted 175, and in 24, we're budgeting 175. So between 22 and 23, we went up basically 75%. And now we're assuming that either we over budgeted that number, or we're projecting no increase from that, which seems kind of odd, where 75% one year and zero the next.
But the 22 budget was 170.
Yeah. Okay. So we're expecting extra money coming back?
Yeah, so all of this is reimbursed at 75% mark, so it's also dependent upon what cases are coming in at any given time. So there are some instances where you might have, a group of veterans who are, on a streak of bad luck that they need support for and that we need to be there for them. So it's always traditionally been a difficult matter to budget, and it isn't unusual. In other communities, they have to look to the reserve fund if necessary. So I think that probably what this was a reflection of was sort of the trends that we were seeing. And so right now, based on our conversations with John, we don't think we need to change it because we've essentially brought it to a point where we believe to be comfortable with. But it isn't like, say, budgeting for a utility where in all likelihood you're going to be using this much electricity in any given month. This is much more variable in nature.
Okay. Do we have a run rate for the first 6 months?
Yeah, 55,000.
Okay, so we're on a run rate about a little, maybe 10% up from last year. So if it's 175 should be
Plenty.
Okay.
Yeah, we recommended leaving it the same. Obviously, we're in a down recession economy, and that's when people need more services, and it makes sense to cut that.
Disability Commission, fiscal year 24 budget, 1,200, we level funded.
Page 161.
Memorial Day.
Page 180.
Yep. Thank you. 1250, and the reason I brought this up was because he had asked, because of inflation, the cost of flags and wreaths have gone up. So he wasn't able to stay within that $750.
I believe this was actually something they talked about for the November special town meeting. We said this is something we could bring forward for next year, so it's something that they talked about.
Yes.
Earlier.
Patriots Day, 0. Historical Commission, level funded, $4,480.
Page 181.
Cultural Council, we brought it up by $1,500 to $5,600. Shade Tree Committee, we reduced it by that same amount, $1,500, based on their utilization.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can I just?
Yeah.
Can you say that again, Alicia? For
Sure.
the Shade Tree Committee, what was that based on?
Their utilization, of what they've been utilizing for funds. I recall last year, they weren't utilizing funds, and through the chair, you had asked us to reduce it, if they're not using it, to give it to the Cultural Council. And we looked again at how they were running and what their usage was, and they weren't fully utilizing it, so we allocated it to the Cultural.
Okay, thank you.
Do we, the trees that they bought for the common, do you know if that was from the shade tree budget? Or was that from, did Highway do that? I don't recall.
That is, if I may, Mr. Chair, I can answer that. That was through the Shade Tree Committee. They actually came up with a whole plan with the tree warden to replace the trees on the common. So I'm surprised that they didn't use all of that funding, because I know that they actually have a plan that they did present to the select board.
And it was over several years, as I recall.
Yes, yeah, so they do have a whole cycle plan, so maybe I'll touch base with them and see where they're at with that, and maybe see if they want to come before the select board just to give us an
Yeah,
update.
okay.
All right, thanks.
And the Permanent Municipal Building Committee, or PMBC, we reduced by $20,000, and you will see when we, I believe when we present the
185.
facilities budget, we added that $20,000 into facilities for the new facilities manager position.
This is just the transfer of existing funds to the facilities manager position.
Correct. Any questions? Property, liability insurance, transfers, and employee benefits.
Page 185 for property and liability insurance.
This budget supports the property and liability insurance for the entire town. We originally requested $600,000 as a conservative estimate. It's $100,000 more than fiscal year '23. TA revised, we spoke to the Meyer representative, and with the conservative estimated increase of 6% to premium, so we were able to reduce the budget to $530,000, or a reduction of $70,000. And that's just showing the change on the slide.
So net increase of 30,000, even with the reduction that we've made, 6%.
Transfers for fiscal year 2024 are based primarily on our finance policy. So I wanted to start with the slide just showing what we're transferring for fiscal year '24.
Which page is that?
187.
187.
And then for transfers, I wanted to know at the November 1st special town meeting, we transferred $1,233,389 to the cap stabilization fund, $160,922.51 to the Oak Hill Trust Fund. That's because we closed out that fund for the Department of Revenue to the general fund. So now all those receipts are going to the general fund, and we created that I shouldn't have called it Oak Hill Trust. It should be Oak Hill Stabilization. Oak Hill Stabilization Fund to hold their receipts as we collect them each year. We do put a little placeholder also in the budget in conservation also for them to utilize some funds while waiting for this to occur every spring meeting.
That was per the IRS, correct?
Department of Revenue.
Department of Revenue, yeah.
So their target was anybody that had cell tower agreements.
Yeah, that's right.
There was no statute that allowed for cell tower agreements to have their own special revenue fund. Therefore, the law says it has to go to the general fund. So I was hoping they were going to update some legislation and start putting some wiggle room for some of these things, because it's very, very hard for communities as certain things come in that are earmarked, you have agreement to put them all in the general fund and let it close the fund balance.
But there's nothing that says what you have to do once it's in the general fund. So if we chose to put it into one of these funds, I mean, town meeting would have to vote, but
Correct.
just because it's not in the statute,
Right.
or they pull it out.
That's why we
Once it's in the
created this.
general fund, we
Right.
can do what we want with it.
Right, and that's why we have it budgeted into the Oak Hill.
Correct.
So the money that went into the general fund goes back to Oak Hill.
And then 437,000, the Community Preservation Fund, Housing Reserves, to Littleton Affordable Housing Trust. There were multiple buckets, the Cooper Farm Development, Jones Meadow Development, Weber Village Development. Their funds all went into the general fund, but they were supposed to go into the Community Preservation Fund, so we had that vote done at special town meeting and then had it go to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Yep.
Employee benefits. In this slide. you
Page
can-
196. Yeah.
Unemployment was reduced based on actual Medicare, and then a little bit of a reduction in long and short-term disability. Medical insurance up 9%, as we spoke earlier, based on the national average. We are hoping to get a sense of what that will be from Maya. Pension up 11.48%. We added more into the pension to help bring it up because we have been funding above and beyond on the OPEB. We want to shift a little bit. We're still funding more on the OPEB, but we also want to shift a little more towards the pension. Employee benefits other went up 13.64%. Workers' comp insurance, $2,000. And OPEB trust down 705, 985. So total expenses change 80,952 or 0.72%.
Mr. Chair, if I could just speak to the medical, the medical number. So this is based, as Alicia said, on the advice we've been given by our insurer, Maya. You will be, some of the select board members will be attending the MMA conference this week. Usually at the conference, they'll provide a range for communities in terms of what the percentage increase will look like, and then maintain within that range so that we'll have a better sense of what that number will be, probably by either Friday or Saturday. I think they typically do it on Saturday. So with that range, we've been informed that we believe that the town is performing well based upon our experience, and so if there is a range, the hope will be we'd be at least toward the lower end of that range. But until such point that they actually sit down with us, which usually happens roughly about a month from now, and really walk through the specifics, we're not going to know what that number is. But as we were talking about earlier, some of the variables that can come up and changes that might come back, this certainly is something that we've highlighted as is something we think we might have some more flexibility for a line item coming forward. So just to let you know what that's, the thinking is behind that number.
Thank you.
So, Alicia, just a quick question on reducing the contribution to OPEB. I mean, do we have a forecast number to be fully funded? I know we were, 80% in 2021, but I mean, do we kind of have a target date that we're?
We do.
Page 200.
Page 200.
All right. In the narrative. So we're working off of a schedule that has us fully funded by 2035. And we're well on the way. As long as we don't run into too many stock market years like last year.
What's the year that you have to have it funded by?
OPEB, there is no.
Yeah, there's no, it's just pension that has a drop date.
Pension
Oh, that's right.
is, I think, 2039 or 40. Middlesex is on target for 2036 right now.
Okay.
But we're still crazy ahead of almost anybody.
Yeah, we're definitely top
OPEB,
5%.
we
Yeah,
are-
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And
And we're seeing the benefit of it, just a $700,000 reduction in our expense this year, so we're starting to see the benefit.
Absolutely.
Switching it over to Middlesex, you can see in the narrative, the money that we have the extra funds that we've sent to Middlesex. I had the actuary look at it, and it's saved us over $11 million between when we put the money in and when we'll be fully funded. So it's well worth it. So at $3 million basically turned into 11.
Is that 700,000 amount like just our discretion? We chose to reduce it by that much?
No, actually, Steve was great enough to say, hey, Alicia, you put the full number in there, and there are some offsets.
Oh, okay.
Littleton Electric Light kicks in an offset, Tiger's Den, LCTV, so 676,568 of that is offsets.
Got it.
Institutional knowledge, it's very good. Great interim treasurer.
Great.
But the financial model is basically the same on OPEB or retirement. If we can get that retirement more to the percentage that OPEB is, it's significant benefit to the town from a cash flow standpoint. But it's not easy to do, but if you can do it, it's really well worth it.
Great.
So I'll ask my standard question, what's employment benefits other?
That's exactly right, other.
Every time they can't answer, you get money.
Change that line to Rob.
We seem to move all the other employee benefit type things into the HR budget, so I wasn't sure what the other one here was.
When I can, again, going back in history, there was no HR department.
Yeah.
This is where the other expenses landed into that other budget. Is there some room there? Probably, I don't know what gets charged there now.
It was actuarial costs were in there for the pension report, OPEB actuarial study. This isn't, I went back to 22, and some FSA was paid out of there as well. And then in 21, same thing, flex spending fees were coming out of there, and actuarial costs.
So it's about 15,000 actuarial costs. Total?
Yes, there's multiple, so I'd have to add them. Yes. And then we talked about the 16,000 based on actuals, 88,000 was reduced due to the elimination of positions, the offsets of 676,568, increased OPEB trust fund by 269,563 to cover the required contribution plus additional funding. So expenses 11,328 was 11,839,632, so a dollar change of $511,005. Any questions on benefits? Moving on, I will then turn it over to Town Administrator Ansaldi for the warrant articles for February 15th.
Just real quick before we move on to that, I just wanted to make sure. So in my notes, we had 3 departments that requested changes, just so that we probably should all keep track of. Yep. So HR, LCTV, and accounting. Anyone have any, did I miss anything, or are those the 3 that was captured as well?
What was possibly the shade tree?
Yeah.
What was the accounting?
PACE training from Munis.
$12,000.
$12,000.
4,000 to 16,000.
With the new module that's coming online, I think they're going to need a lot of training. Currently, my office assistant, town accountant, Michelle Reynolds, does a lot of IT questions and troubleshooting, and we'd like to have them have the access to online training.
And Tyler, do you remember what LCTV was?
I was just picking up some of the
benefits.
operating
Some of that
costs.
benefit,
Oh, yeah, that's
the
right.
80 grand.
Right, yeah, that's, okay. Okay.
Any amount helps extend the life of the pig.
And then HR was a 19-hour.
Yeah, 25 grand.
Yep. All right, thanks. I just wanted to make sure we all remember the same thing.
So cool.
Anthony, back to you.
Any other questions with night 1 for the budget? So we've listed the special town meeting warrant articles, in case there were any questions, but we're just finalizing, and we're waiting for the final version to come back from town council, which we expect to get tomorrow because we have to go to the printer by the end of the day tomorrow, ship it off. But these are the 10 articles for the February 15th special town meeting. I will say Article 7, some good news to share there, and I shared it with select board members last week, that Indian Hill was looking for $4.2 million. We offered $3.5 million, and they've accepted our offer at $3.5 million. They were taking backup offers, and they received 2 other backup offers. One was $3.5 million as well. That was a cash transaction, and they got a full asking price at 4.2 by somebody else. So what they said is they're holding true to their word that they want to offer it to the town first, depending on what happens at town meeting. But if that did fail at town meeting, I think that that building will be sold rather quickly.
In all likelihood, it'll be used for a Dover amendment use, where we won't get any tax revenue out of it.
Absolutely. It's really, they're looking at schools and churches, right. So right now, just we get 0 tax revenue out of it. And that was one of the pitches that we made to them, was we were a gracious host for Indian Hill for a number of years. And yeah, we are looking for the hometown discount because we provided a lot of service to them as far as being able to use overflow parking at the high school and one-day liquor licenses. And, the select board has always been a gracious host to, in the town, to Indian Hill, and it was time to recoup some of that. So that's great news. I have a letter of intent that which means nothing until we have a P&S and then town meeting authorization to proceed, but that's a $700,000 decrease right there.
And I wanted to put this on this agenda because I think Brian came to our last select board meeting to discuss, why are we buying this? Why are we spending $3.5 million and not turning it into a senior center when we're spending $16 million on a new senior center? So,
we were hoping.
And I can just say I have since gotten a lot more information, so I'm cool.
Sounds good. Then we're done. Okay.
A lot of those questions are questions that others are going to ask.
Yeah. No,
right.
Absolutely. I'm just saying, I'm with y'all.
So we do plan on, for the 24th, putting together a little bit of a presentation on what we would be presenting before a special town meeting, before town meeting on the 15th. So some of that is how did this come about and so forth. So we'll work with the select board, make sure that we cover all of their priorities, because this has been something that's really, it goes back to Indian Hill discussions with, I think you were on the school committee, which was quite a number of years ago, so.
Okay, you don't.
Oh, sorry. Well, you
wasn't necessary.
Remember you used to do that to poor Joe Knoxville? You are the elders.
Yeah, exactly.
So, there's a number of things that have happened over the years that, why I think the select board wanted to throw Indian Hill to town meeting.
The one thing I would say, and this is a legit discussion for us, is that I think, how we use each of the buildings is still a little up in the air. I think it's fair to assume that after the purchase, there's going to be some renovation costs. So I think it would be fair to say to town meeting, hey, this is a purchase we've got to make or else we're going to lose it, and we're saving all this money, so yay, good. But there are going to be additional costs. We're going to come back to you later for some costs that we don't know quite what they are yet.
Right.
And you have to bear with us, because it's going to sit so much better if we say that than if somebody asks a question, we're have to say, oh, yeah, there's going to be more money.
Yeah,
so
no,
I think
absolutely.
we're just upfront about it, and we get ahead of the narrative.
Yeah, we totally agree, Brian. That's
great.
in the presentation that we want to do. Well, we don't have that number, but we, in repurposing some of the capital items, we have a little bit more money to address some of the items that the select board has identified as goals, as far as if we get that building, we now need to do, I know people hate the word feasibility study, call it engineering, call it anything, but that's Mass General Law, Chapter 149. When you spend over $150,000 and the project is going to be more than $1 million, you have to have an OPM and all that. So there's some unknown there, but you're right. There's definitely going to be an additional cost. What that is, it depends on the use, too.
Right, and, this is a great joint meeting as we move forward with, hey, what do we want to do with these various buildings, We'd love to be part of that process.
Planning a community night where we're going to have that building open to the public before town meeting so they can actually walk through. And then we can have, what we're trying to do is address some potential uses. Well, that's not set in stone, obviously, because the select board hasn't decided how that's going to be, but we're exploring that with the school department, park and rec, et cetera. So I think having a night where the residents can see what you'd be buying and some of the ideas that we think that we have at this point in time, I think that would be helpful.
Right. Sorry, go ahead. No, I'm just saying, it's all moving so quickly, and as much as like some of us are catching up, I think a lot of the residents are like, gotta be, I don't want to say blindsided, but quite surprised. So great to hear that you're planning that.
I think we agree with you, Brian, to the extent that we know we have to begin that message. We would have hoped to have some of this information even to you earlier, but really a lot of what we've been doing is being so focused on getting the warrant together, and this has turned around. We know now we have to pivot to be able to present this information and make our case.
Absolutely.
And it is quick because they have Indian Hill on the market now that it wasn't before. And they'd like a decision and not lose out on other opportunities. So because there was an interest in having a special town meeting anyways because of the firearm bylaw, it kind of played nicely into presenting this to town meeting on the 15th.
Right, and kudos for putting the firearm bylaw last. It'll make sure people stay.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah. That was accidental.
I didn't even notice that.
So last week when we met, I wasn't really in favor of buying Indian Hill, and the main reason is I have no idea what we're going to use it for, and we have other buildings that are available that need to be refurbished, similar to the town building, right? There's space there and it needs to be refurbished and it would cost money. So I don't know who you spoke to or who gave you information, because I'm still not on board, because I have no idea what town buildings we own, what they're being utilized for, what the costs are to refurbish. We did do some planning, but that was years ago, pre-COVID. So we don't have anything current saying, here's the we have a capital wish list, but we don't have a capital plan that shows what's the future of the town, the projections, what are the buildings we have. Why are we going into the property business and buying another new building, or an old building, but adding another building to our portfolio? What are we going to use it for? So I'm still not for this because I haven't seen the information you've seen. If I had a house, I wouldn't go and buy another. This is the example I used last week. If I had a house and my wife wanted a new house, I wouldn't go and buy another new house.
Well, and that's what we want to make sure that we produce for the 24th, is to be able to answer that question for you and for the residents. Why are we interested, or why is the select board even interested? Because this is a long process that they've gone through with space needs. So it identified a number of areas. We looked at putting everything here at Town Hall on the campus. We looked at purchasing land elsewhere. With the DCU building that was evaluated, which at the time was for sale.
But that was the work done a few years ago, right?
That was the work a few years ago. But this is all work that's kind of led into this right now.
Not really.
It's all the prices have significantly
Prices for sure,
increased.
but the uses and the needs and the space needs, all of those, we've got a number of reports.
Program fitting.
Yeah, program fitting,
It's
that's all
based
there.
on what the different departments identified as needs, and it was a complete and comprehensive look at all the departments and sort of prioritizing which ones were the most cramped and which ones were, had needed specific program space, like EHS needs rooms to meet with people for medical consultations, things like that. So I think that, the cost might have changed, but I don't think that the needs have changed significantly.
So the one thing that I hear in town when I talk to folks is we have the town building, the town hall, and that would cost money to refurb, but it's refurbishable, right? And what I would love to see in the assessment is why are we not doing that and we're going to buy Indian Hill instead?
So there's a, I'm sorry.
No,
So,
you go
so the select board also threw out a request for information, what's called an RFI. And that's looking at turning Shattuck Street into potentially deeply discounted senior housing, which is a big need in the town. So with that, Al, when looking at Shattuck Street to do renovations, well, we haven't gone through actually having somebody come in and do that. The price is going to be enormous. There's no split system, and anytime you do over a 30% improvement in the value, you have to bring the entire building up to code.
compliance.
So with that, it's sprinkler systems, it's new elevators because the ADA compliance. The doors, our doors are not ADA compliant. Asbestos remediation. We have boilers that are quite old. You know, we have one part of the building that was built in 1920s, and then it went from 20s, 30s to 50s or somewhere around there. But and we've done a great job. The town's done a great job over the year utilizing Shattuck Street for its purpose, but it's time, and it's tired, and we have sewer pipes that break that we have.
What would be good to see is, I think that's more of the current stuff then, right? Is when I say the plan is old, it is old and it is outdated because it doesn't include Shattuck Street, because with what you just said, all the town offices need to move somewhere too. So I need to see the plan, because I haven't seen that plan, the new plan.
Right.
And I'm happy to, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, and agreed. And one of the questions that I have is, if Shattuck Street is in such bad shape, 30 million, whatever, to do anything with it, and it's so bad that town offices can't stay there, how is it then that a developer is going to come in and turn it into very, very low-cost senior housing and make any money off of it?
Because he doesn't have to pay prevailing wage.
Right.
And his specialty and what he's really good at is converting old buildings into apartments. It's what he's done, like, for his whole career.
So if I may,
Sorry, you could get me there, but it's, I mean, you see where I'm coming from.
Right.
Oh, this building is terrible. Hey, it's going to be awesome and low cost. It's like, and I hear you that maybe we've got the guy who can do it, but on the face of it, it's really.
so if I may, Mr.
Sure.
Chair, so Brian, I don't know if you guys can move back so I can say thank you, appreciate it.
I'll show my belly.
And, so what we did was we issued an RFI, so there's certain organizations in the Commonwealth that's what they specialize in. So we issued an RFI for discounted senior affordable housing for the Shattuck Street building. So there's a lot of organizations in the state, that's what they specialize in. And what they do is they have funding sources, so they get financial aid from the state.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So that's how they create that level of affordability. They get funding from outside sources that help them offset their costs for creating whatever it is they're going to create. So that's how they make it worth their while. So that was one of the avenues that we've been looking at in tandem to everything else that's going on in town is, what are we going to do with this building? Because, the library's vacated, the CEHS department's vacating, right? So who's left?
Right.
And so,
Gotcha.
and you got my email, right? Did you get my email?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I should have sent it to everybody on Fincom. I apologize. I can send it over to you. So, but it really just summarized the program fitting that was done through the space needs study. And it basically shows every department in the town of Littleton what their current utilization is as far as square footage, and what their projection is in the future, right? So what we did was, when we looked at Indian Hill, we looked at the square footage of that building, we looked at the needs of the current departments, and we tried to figure out, well, who could fit in that building? And we wanted to fit 2 departments in that building. as opposed to one. It was too big for EHS, so we figured, what else can fit in there? And that's how that all kind of came about. But Alan, to your point, it's like, okay, so hypothetically, say we buy Indian Hill, and now we move the school department out and Park and Rec out, and they go to Indian Hill, right? So who's left here in this building or in Shattuck Street? And what's the plan? So what's the next phase? So I fully appreciate that. We need to get all those answers out there.
Right. And this should be all part of the narrative. Because I promise you, it's easier if we do it than if somebody says what I just said at town meeting.
Right.
And then it'll be a mess.
Yeah, it needs to come on the up. Right up.
But another piece to this, and may or may not be popular, but the opportunity cost. I mean, Indian Hill is it's contiguous to our high school. There's opportunities if we need to do some sort of expansion, whether the school department goes there and they're able to offer some additional programming out of that facility. If we were to build Indian Hill on that 4-acre lot, we wouldn't be able to do it for 3.5. Now, to your point, Brian, there is going to be there's some needs that they've known for a while that they've been leaving, so there's been some deterioration, if you will. So it hasn't been painted.
Under-maintained.
And it's a great point, too, that Chuck brings up, because with the price now, we're looking at, I think it's just under $200 a square foot to buy this property. What we do know is that
We paid for this, what we're going to pay
what
for
we're
the
paying
senior
for
center.
this and what we're paying for the senior center is, it's somewhere between the 700 and 800, depending on what the bids come. Thank God lumber's come down, so hopefully we get some favorable news there, but, so if we're looking at 700 to 800,000, renovation costs, they when you talk to the experts, they say it's about 50% of new construction. So when you look at that, say if it's $300 or $400, $300 or $400 a square foot, added to the less than $200 a square foot, we basically would be getting a building that's renovated for a lot cheaper than we would get it for, be able to build something like that for new. Because to the point, I think it was Matthew who brought it up, prevailing wage really hurts us. We really become limited to, we're forced to pay that higher rate. And when you have a private contractor that can come in, they're doing it for a third of the cost of municipality doing it. And every municipality in the state struggles with it. It's law, and that's what we live with, but it makes it cost prohibitive for a lot of communities to deal with their buildings, and a lot end up with poor buildings because they don't deal with it. Littleton is pretty fortunate that you have, when you look back at all your buildings now, you have the oldest, the police stations, a little over 10, fire stations, 4 years old now, 3 or 4 years old now, library's brand new, you'll have a new EHS center, and quite possibly, if the plan comes out to fruition with senior housing at Shattuck Street and a new town hall somewhere, you're going to be able to say to other communities that you basically handled all your infrastructure and all your buildings. And I believe that we're going to be able to do that within the levy, it's what we're working for. Right now, we're right on target. Everything that you've done is within the levy, with the exception of schools. And quite honestly, you're never going to be able to fit a school project under the levy. It's
Agreed.
impossible.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, but I think, to your point, right, it's just making sure we're presenting those whole costs, right?
Right.
If it's $200, $3.5 million, and another $300 to $400 a square foot to renovate, it's really 3.5 plus 7, right? So.
Yeah, do I think that it's going to be required that much renovation? I don't, but I'm not, listen, that's why we hire experts to do that. But looking through the building, it's in pretty decent shape. We do have to replace some HVAC units that were identified as needing to be replaced. There's 6 currently that handle that building, so, those go for 20 to 30,000 maybe a piece being installed, so
It
the prevailing wage.
It also solves some of the issues we were talking about, the tennis courts. Now, that's kind of a small apples here we're talking about, but it solves some of that problem with the shaping of that property.
Wasn't that small.
Yeah, no, it's a very big issue, but, and as well as, we're forgetting about the land that comes with this.
Right.
That literally you could duplicate that building right next to it, but that's how much property is there in that space. So I think, the question's going to remain, the property here, the campus feel with the senior reduced cost housing, the library, the senior center, great. We already have, obviously, a population on Shattuck. This campus makes sense. It does make sense for Indian Hill, obviously, to put school offices, make a whole lot of sense over there. Park and Rec to some extent too, with the students and the programming down there. To your point, what's left here and what's the plan, right? And that's going to be the question I think that we have to have some answers to, and I know we have some, but getting there and how long is the question on what that's going to look like. So,
Yeah, we'll have some more answers, because just moving those two, the departments that you just mentioned, Gary, is great advantage to the town. Why? Because if we had to account for that space that Cindy identified, I think, in her memo, we're looking at needing to have a town hall potentially that's an extra 5,000 square feet. With the price of construction, if we can keep that down to as low as possible, then, we don't need a big footprint for a new town hall. We would need a lot smaller, because we got rid of two of the bigger space
we're
eaters.
thinking about LCTV takes up a pretty good size footprint, which potentially we have an answer for.
Yeah,
as well.
there was talk, as Mark mentioned, about, whether or not the Lapoli companies may want to donate that to the town. I think that's still open for discussions, but we're not there yet. I think we have a lot of things to still iron out, as far as making sure sewer is all set and that we see shovels in the ground, because I keep driving by and I don't see anything there except those two existing buildings that we've been looking at now for a few years, right? So, but there's a savings. There's a potential savings, because we don't need as big of a building for a town hall, and we're getting a much reduced rate.
Excuse me, something has popped into my head here. Is LCTV tied to prevailing wage?
Yes.
They go up and do something all by themselves?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
They are, okay.
Even if we had
State's very strict with their prevailing wage laws in terms of what we're encumbered by.
Municipal finance.
Yeah, there's sometimes in situations where if we lease something to somebody, that they have to follow prevailing wage laws, because the town still owns it, so, yeah, we're still held to
I
that.
just didn't know whether they would, be held to that same
Yeah.
ridiculous labor rate.
I think, like, schedule-wise timeline for Fincom, I think, we obviously have a joint meeting with you next week, which you're going to present us a lot more info, and then I think our next meeting will be the 7th, right? I guess pending.
It's the super,
anything based on
the Super Saturday
right?
on the 4th.
Yeah,
On
that's
the
Saturday
4th.
as well.
Well, yeah, so we'll have time to vote, ask more questions and vote our recommendation prior to the 15th.
Right. It might be great for y'all to give the town meeting presentation you're going to give to us, and see what questions we have.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Oh, that's absolutely.
That's a really good idea.
Shoot
Right.
bullets in it here, right? And then we'll make the changes and the
Right.
tweaks necessary, yeah.
Because it wasn't but a month ago that I at least was hearing, Indian Hill, that'll be the, new senior center, and I understand, that ship has sailed, I get it, but I didn't know that at the time, So there's just so much, this could be a smooth town meeting or another one of these till midnight deals.
Yeah, and that's why we really want to make sure we have that presentation and the opportunity to have the open house and really allow residents to come out and have the opportunity to not only see the building, but talk to us. And talk to the select board, who we hope would be there at 2, schedule, providing on their schedules, but really to really talk through some of that stuff too, because there's no better folks to talk to than the board right here, who really had working on this plan for a number of years.
And there's a few town meeting vocal residents that you might want to just grab on the side. You know who I mean?
Yeah. Listen, if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody, and you can come to my office, and, we'll sit down with anybody, and that's in this room, and that's any resident that wants to talk about it, we'll make time.
I just have 2 more questions. To sell the town building to a developer, does the town have to vote on that?
Anytime you dispose of municipal property, it has to go before a town meeting.
This is tied to that. So if selling to town offices to become senior living, is tied to Indian Hill. Indirectly, but directly, right? So, because if we move to Indian Hill, one of the things is that we're looking at doing something with this building here, and then we go and we tell people that, and we go and we buy Indian Hill, but then next year, or the year after that, we don't do anything with this. Indian Hill we bought, based on saying, hey, this is part of the plan. So, I think we really need to bring some of these things up in front of town, saying, do you guys want to sell the town building? Let's vote on that. Do you guys want to buy Indian Hill? Let's vote on that. And then I guess the square footage that these two departments have now, what do they have now? You have Park and Rec and School. What square footage do they have?
Well, I couldn't give you that.
We have that in
We have
reports.
it.
We have it, yeah.
It's in because you're
I
buying
just don't
something
know
that's
off the
like,
top
what,
of my head,
15 or
yeah.
20,000 square feet for
I
two
mean,
departments.
Park and Rec has taken over the old library.
Two floors.
Two floors of the library.
floors,
So they
yeah.
probably have about, I'd guess about 10,000.
Yeah, probably.
10 to
Yeah.
12,000 square feet now.
And EHS basically has about 1/5 of the space they need right now.
School department, I think, only has maybe 3,000 square feet.
They're
You know,
they're severely cramped.
Yeah, and
it's
Indian
not-
Hill
It's
would-
not, it's all
It's all, yeah,
Jogged.
there's a lot of not usable space in town hall.
a shaft.
And even, I think there's a group probably that's going to ask, can we refurbish that building after all this is done? And with what's left in town hall? That's probably a question we're going to have answered. Or does the town still own that property? I mean, we're talking about one option would be putting senior housing there, but the other option would be that building comes down and a smaller building goes in that place and becomes the town hall. I don't know.
Right.
Right, that's
So-
another.
So it's not even just that, I mean, there is the potential that maybe we need that for flex space, maybe something happens with the MSBA and the funding isn't available for us to do Shaker Lane within the next 5 years, and that provides some flex space for us to be able to do, I mean,
Then we got
who knows?
right?
I just
Then
know
we
that
got
other
refurb
communities,
based on what we were.
right, other communities have used old schools, or they've leased them out to, charter schools, and so there's any number of things that
Yeah,
could
the-
potentially
In
happen.
my corporate job,
This town has done
this is what, when I talk about a capital plan, these are all the things that we do. In my corporate job, we have
Certainly.
all the what-if scenarios
Yep.
and everything built out, and that's what I don't see. So that's why I'm
Yep.
questioning this, because I don't see that.
Yeah, good, those are all good questions to
Well, I think
raise.
it was sped up because it went for sale, and
Yeah.
we knew the property was gonna go quick. So
Right.
I think we're blessed to have this town meeting happen. It wasn't due to this project, but it worked, the timing worked out great, if this was to happen. But at the end of the day, the message, we gotta continue with the message.
Right.
I mean, these are great questions, because I think when you do present it,
The
the
100 people
presentation's
that
gonna
show
have
up
to
to town
change on
meeting
some
are
of the
going to
things.
ask.
And I agree with you,
Should have a good
Al,
10,000.
Al, I agree with you. We kind of have to plan for,
I know.
what's going to happen
I know.
to the potentials, but it's way too early to decide a vote, because we really don't know whether it's a renovation, a rip down, senior housing or anything. We have ideas on what we could do, but the plan on actually doing it is still several years out.
Yeah.
So, we should indicate that we have a plan or potential plans, but
We
it's
have a vision.
we have a vision. Much better word.
We have.
Right.
Right.
And I think
go ahead and put it.
people can get behind the vision.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to elucidate it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do a good job with that, I can't imagine that you wouldn't get support. If you don't do a good job, you better be ready to have your hats handed to you. So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of where we are.
Just to-
I think you feel it, with what Al's saying.
Absolutely.
He hasn't been in some of the discussions,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's the unease, but, he's already seeming to come around.
No, super
So
valid.
that, no, seriously, I think that's the issue.
Even with Al's, I'm not gonna buy another house when we already have a house, but you don't know what opportunities, maybe the next door neighbor's house goes up for sale, and it's just a deal that you just really can't, you just can't pass that up. And I really feel as though this opportunity, that property's been there forever, and Anthony alluded to the fact that when I was in school committee, we were talking to them, because knowing that they had plans, they had a vision for what they built in Groton. And so it's been on the radar, but nobody knew it was gonna happen this quickly. But the opportunity, if the town decides not to do this, I can say personally, I'm gonna be disappointed, because I do feel as though we really should own that piece of property because of the proximity. And for us to replace or to build that structure anywhere in town to support any of our services would cost us 10x.
Yeah.
If we voted to buy it, we would then have to pick up, because I was thinking about what you just said, is if my neighbor's property and it was a great deal, then I would think about, okay, now the landscaping company, I gotta pay double the expense, I have now utilities, I have this, is that all worked into this budget in here? All the expenses for Indian Hill?
Yeah, we need to get those.
The maintenance is not, to the best of my knowledge, the maintenance hasn't
No.
factored into any presentation that we've worked on.
Because we should think about that too, and let the town know, hey, we're buying it for this, and it's also going to increase our town expenses by whatever. That's just another thing to think about, instead of us coming to the budget next year and saying, okay, school.
We owe $20,000.
Now we have another 20,000 because we bought this building, right?
Well, like insurance and utilities, we should be able to get those numbers.
Well, we have some idea with this
Yeah.
building right here we're in, so we have an idea of cost, for sure, right? Sorry.
Well, and we have all the bills from Indian Hill. Well, we could get all the bills from Indian Hill and say, what have you been paying?
Yeah, well, I think to your point, right, it'll be impactful on whatever our final decisions are around the fiscal '24 budget, right?
That kind of leads into number 8 on your list here, right? The town meeting articles, closing those out, there's some money there that.
Right, there is some money. I just worked through, the town council is looking at the changes that I made to Article 8 and repurpose some of the old capital items. So this way, if town meeting decides to purchase Indian Hill, then we can go right into feasibility studies and determine what we need for improvements to that building, with the goal of probably going back to special town meeting in the fall for some sort of improvement money. What that is, I don't know.
One thing I'd say, just from a policy point of view, 8 is essentially found money, and our policy always has been that found money goes off into stabilization funds. So while it is potentially convenient to say, let's use 8 to knock down an immediate cost, I would float the notion of taking, anytime we have found money, you put it in the cap stabilization fund. Doesn't mean you can't then take it out again, but found money should go, I think, to stabilization funds.
So the last time we did this, we used it we repurposed some capital money for another capital project. So, well, normally, yes, what you're saying makes sense, but we already know that we have to replace tennis courts, and we don't have a funding source right now for that. So we're only talking about $333,000, roughly around there, of found money. It's not really found, but it's just repurpose capital project. So that the 333 would cover all of these outbuildings that we have. Not only Indian Hill, it can cover a little bit more at Town Hall. It can have we have some buildings at the Orchard that we're going to need to address too. So all of that 333,000, as much as it might sound like a lot of money,
Goes fast.
It goes really fast in our world,
Absolutely, I'm just a
unfortunately.
policy kind of guy.
So, but we don't want to have to wait, Brian, if town meeting votes on this, we can jump right into talking to the select board about getting a feasibility study done on Indian Hill, so we can start using it, because if we have to wait for authorization in May, that means, we might not be looking for another whole year before we really are ready for some kind of improvement money.
Okay.
And the last thing you want to do is have a building that you just spent $3.5 million sit there for 2 years really vacant and just minimal expenses on it with utilities just to keep the.
So to Brian's
Totally
point, maybe we should add, instead of asking for 3.5, we ask for 3.5 plus whatever the cost of the feasibility study is, right? Or put that on there somewhere, right?
We also have some other money that was allocated for facility improvements in addition to the $333,000 that I think will cover everything.
Well, I think a feasibility study is fairly short money in this, but we just need to figure out where it is. Right, so.
Yeah.
And it would be better not, I agree with Brian on the principle of not taking that money and just generally repurposing it. It seems like it should go through the process.
I think, to Brian's point again, it's, as long as it's not flowing into the operating budget. If it's used for a one-time thing like this feasibility study, I think we can say it's okay. If there's other costs that are coming out of that number 8, and paying for the electricity bills and paying for the water bills or whatever for these buildings, we need to keep track of that and
Right.
see what's leaked into the operating budget and then make changes to the operating budget
Exactly.
moving forward.
Right.
Because those are going to be recurring.
Makes sense.
That's right. That's right.
So Article 6, what's the modification to the CPC budget? What's that article?
That is because the match was lower than we estimated. In addition, during special town meeting, sorry, through the chair, during special town meeting, they changed the percentages on how much they wanted for the match. So not only in the original do we take the match estimated based on what they voted at annual town meeting, now I have to take the percentages, change it, and it was less than what we estimated. So that's the amendment.
We guessed wrong what the state was gonna,
Well, they told us,
yeah, they told them, then they changed it, well, they,
and then they changed it.
yeah, it's not uncommon.
Any other questions on the articles?
What's 9?
9?
Yeah.
9 is a planning board article to increase the King Street Common zoning that would increase it from its current footprint to include
410 Great Road.
Yangtze River all the way to the corner, everything but the gas station from 410 Great
Oriental
Road.
Market,
Right.
all the way down the sub shop, but also 410 Great Road.
Okay, cool.
Expands it to the other side of the street.
It would be great to do something with Yangtze. Goodness, what a nice store.
Put a Sal's Pizza there.
Yeah, probably.
He does great out of that gas station over there. By the way, Down the just street, when yeah.
It's expanding to the Yangtze River Restaurant, not the Yangtze River, because that would be.
That would be too,
Point clarification to everybody, so.
We're just taking over the world here.
Anything else?
West for the
Well, I would just say, discussion of the orchard probably for town meeting. Fincom's going to have to get pulled into, we're still in a lot of executive sessions on that, obviously, but I think we're getting to a point where, yeah, we're going to have to start talking about that once some things are settled and where.
We can come to one of your exec sessions.
That's true,
Do we have input from the planning board? Excuse me. Yes.
Ian, can you come up to the mic if you're gonna, please?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Anna Houston from the Planning Board. I wanted to share with you all that tomorrow I'm going to be having a conversation with Maren because there's a couple little tweaks in warrant article number 9 for the King Street Common District expansion, just in terms of language, and then also the map. So I heard that there may have been, last week at your meeting for the select board, that there may have been a map that perhaps wasn't as user-friendly. Was this the map?
There were two. One had the additions offset improperly on the
Right.
on the roads, but then later there was a version that did seem to be accurate.
Right, I think we got the right map now.
Yeah, it was the same map, it was just how it was copied over. so
Right.
Okay.
That's fine.
So the reason why I wanted to ask about that specifically is that per the directions that are on here, for example, it says west of Great Road. I will discuss with her because I actually think that should say south of Great Road. And as such, I wanted to also get a map that actually shows the areas, a map that actually shows the areas with the 40-foot setback, et cetera, so that it's really very, very clear when we go to town meeting. So I just wanted to give everybody that heads up and to ask if you all had any comments or questions with respect to the map. I'm happy to take your input as well.
So when you have a updated map or an updated zoning bylaw, then it would obviously be forwarded to our office and we'll include it in a handout for special town meeting. We'll present it to the select board
Awesome.
at a meeting before town meeting so they can have an opportunity to look at it and then just allow us to make that correction for special town meeting.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Through the chair, one comment?
Yeah.
I just want to remind you that the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds have to be dedicated by December 2024.
Okay.
And that means they have to have a signed contract purchase order in place.
So you can actually send that out to bid before December of 2024.
Soon.
Crazy talk.
If there's nothing else, I guess we can adjourn.
I was trying to get us to go till 10.
Mel, I'll stay with you if you want to talk till 10.
Move the select
That's
board
fine.
adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Gary. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion, select board's adjourned.
Motion to adjourn FinCom.
Can I get a second?
I'm going to stay here all night.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of Finance Committee adjourned?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey, is that sewer article, that's about the Box Road?
Yeah.